Chapter 564. Early the next morning, the morning wind was mighty and there were no clouds in the sky. Princess Odoheim was ordered by Dustless to return to the Fishman Island early. This was also the result of her pleading. Of course, it was also her last trip to the Fishman Island. In addition, she also had a special task given to her by Dustless. The Fishman Island had long been regarded as a forbidden place by Wuchen. Whitebeard had unscrupulously occupied the island. How could Wuchen just watch the duck that was about to reach his mouth disappear without a trace? Especially that old guy had a close relationship with the former pirate king Joel D. Roger. There is a great possibility that he would get the news of the ancient weapon Poseidon from Roger. Whitebeard's ambition has to be guarded against. Although the Surface and Akagami, red hair, are righteous people, it is undeniable that he is a big pirate king, as cunning as a rabbit. Roger and Shiki of the three legendary pirates have already fallen, and now only Whitebeard is performing. Dustless, Sama, Whitebeard's fleet only has a small number of personnel stationed on the Fishman Island, which does not constitute a substantial threat. The people of the Whitebeard pirates are also quite educated. At least they didn't do such things as robbing. White Zetsu explained, and his words showed admiration for Whitebeard. He is afraid that only the Whitebeard pirates can restrain the inferior pirates to such an obedient level. Hearing that Whitebeard is not on the Fishman Island, Dustless's heart relaxed. At least he doesn't have the idea of the ancient weapon Poseidon. What about the traces of the CP9 brats yesterday? They should have gone to report to Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars. Wearing pajamas, sitting leisurely on the sofa, Dustless asked calmly, "Brats?" Hearing this, White Zetsu was stunned at first, and then understood that Dustless was talking about the CP9. He said they didn't. They seemed to have gathered to discuss it yesterday, but they didn't say anything after discussing it all night. It is estimated that they went to Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars, or Commander Kong, to make a choice. White Zetsu said truthfully, although he didn't know why he cared about a few minions, he still collected information seriously. This kind of thing is beyond the scope of what the CP9 can do. It can only be solved by finding a higher-level person. Commander Kong and Gorosei are the best candidates. That doesn't matter. It's the same no matter who knows about the 5 Honored Stars or Commander Kong. Moreover, if I'm not wrong, the results of their actions should be the same. Dustless smiled calmly. He had already guessed the decision of the 5 Honored Stars. On the avenue of Mariehua, all the members of the CP9 looked very unnatural. It's not that they suspected Blueno. They trained together when they were children, and they were already honest with each other. They would never be bored enough to suspect that he was a traitor. Even if Bruno's explanation was reasonable, in their eyes, it was extremely far-fetched. Even if some people were really careless, what they said casually was not something they could pry into. Since you doubt me, let the 5 great elders decide. Bruno was too lazy to waste his breath and simply kicked the ball to the 5 great elders. Lucci saw all this, and his heart burned with a blazing flame. He was particularly irritated. He always felt that this was a trap, and even if he knew, he had to fall into it. Even if it's really out of thin air, no one can resist the temptation of the ancient weapon Pluton blueprint. When they first heard that Pluton's blueprint was in Water 7, they fell into a trap. That kid must have done this on purpose. In the spacious and bright hall, the highest power of the world government, Gorosei, 5 great elders, lived here. This is also the place where they usually discuss and work. The Gorosei, 5 great elders, who had bronze skin and blonde hair, had a cold look in his eyes. He was sure that Dustless did this. He let Blueno hear the news about Pluton's blueprint on purpose. The purpose was to attract their attention. Indeed, he designed a trap that we had to fall into. The bald Kwang Lao Xing, who was holding the saber, frowned and said, there was an evil and cruel aura between his eyebrows. They had always been in the upper hand in the past several fights with Wu Chun. They hadn't expected that the counterattack would be so fierce this time. They were caught off guard. Even if it's nonsense, they must send undercover agents to check it out. Rumors come from nowhere. Water 7 was responsible for the construction of Pluto, so it's normal for other blueprints to exist. The Gorasei, 5 great elders, said with a face full of wisdom. He was the tallest among the 5, so he immediately attracted the attention of the other 4. The other 4 Gorasei, 5 great elders, nodded in agreement. It's not impossible to keep a copy of Pluton's blueprint, just in case. Anyway, this isn't a trap. We're definitely going to fall into it. With a sigh, the Gorasei, 5 great elders, said helplessly. They used to be the dominant force, but now they're suddenly pulled down. With the help of the Pluton's blueprint incident, that kid painstakingly led our attention to Water 7. It's definitely not a good thing. He must be secretly planning some unknown conspiracy. The Gorasei, 5 great elders, said gloomily. It's not that they haven't schemed against Dustless before, but every time they were easily broken by him, and they were slapped in the face. Hearing this, the other 5 Elder Stars all had gloomy faces, including the 5 Elder Stars with long hair and beard who had been talking loudly before. In the past, they had also fought with each other. They were the ones who played dirty, but in the end, they were the ones who were played dirty. Now that Dustless took the initiative to make a move, they really didn't have much confidence in winning. It doesn't matter, we will send a few CP9 members to Water 7 as spies. They were the ones who discovered Pluton's blueprint, so it doesn't matter if they are spies. Even if they all die in the end, they're just small pawns, it's not a big deal. The Gorasei, 5 great elders, with a scar on his forehead, said coldly. Everyone knows this simple truth. Chapter 565. 3 days later, in the system world. In the pavilion, Dustless's expression was different from before. There was a rare look of anxiety and impatience on his face, and his calm eyes also splashed out ripples and waves. His heart also became restless. I couldn't tell that you would actually lose your composure over this kind of thing. The ethereal celestial voice spread, and the system consciousness Ling looked at Dustless in surprise. Dustless gave people the feeling that he was an emotionless robot. Just like today, he showed an anxious expression from time to time. Who knows how many times in his life? Could it be that you think I'm a stone with a heart of stone? I'm also a person of flesh and blood. Dustless stared at Ling in annoyance and said impatiently. Around dawn, System Ling told Dustless that Huey G's due date had arrived. Since then, his heart had not been at ease, and it was in his throat, like the waves of the sea, sometimes high and sometimes low. His Tao heart, that was as immovable as a rock, also began to loosen. Humans were not plants and could not be emotionless. Although Dustless's temperament was unusually cold, he was not a stubborn stone that did not understand the affairs of the world. He always maintained concern for his own people. But he, who was not good with words, had always hidden this sincere feeling in his heart, and only silently guarded it. There was no need to make it known to everyone. There is a saying that everything was interconnected, and some things did not need to be explained at all. On the contrary, sometimes things would go in the opposite direction when they reached an extreme, and the more one explained, the darker it would become. Everything was fine as long as one let nature take its course. System Ling looked at Dustless with a smile, with an understanding attitude. As a father for the first time, it was normal for him to feel a little nervous. After all, this was also the first time Dustless experienced this. Anyway, I rarely see such an anxious expression on your face. In my impression, this is the first time I've seen you. A light voice with loneliness and sadness came from behind, like a supreme celestial voice, soothing one's heart. However, at this moment, Dustless was unable to be happy. His face stiffened with a hint of guilt. Looking back, he saw Atsutsuki Hiruo, whom he hadn't seen for a while. At this moment, she looked a little sad. Her face was as pale as the snow in the winter. Her face was full of loneliness. She clenched her silver teeth, and the corners of her mouth were extremely bitter. There were even some obvious cracks. I'm really sorry. The corners of Dustless's mouth wriggled. His heart felt like it was being twisted by a knife, and he was speechless and extremely guilty. He had spent the most time with Yuluo. The latter had always wanted to have a child, but to this day, she still couldn't fulfill her wish. Instead, it was Huey who came later who got there first. I don't want you to. Glancing at Dustless in disappointment, Uluo's eyes were dim and lifeless. Her silvery hair had also become much whiter. Her entire body was emitting an extremely powerless feeling of hesitation and loss. Her heavenly beauty gave others the feeling that she had become much older in an instant. Seeing this, Dustless's heart clenched, and he was just about to persuade her when the clear and melodious cry of a child resounded. Woo! Dustless was stunned. Looking at Kagaya's delivery room, his body turned into a gust of wind and rushed forward. Breaking the door and entering, a stunning woman with golden hair was reflected in Dustless's eyes. She was dressed quite casually, with light makeup and no makeup, and her skin was as white as snow. She didn't need to be deliberately dressed up. Her whole person was natural and unrestrained, giving people a very magnanimous and natural feeling. Looking around, it was Tsunade with golden hair. As a medical ninja, she knew much more than Dustless, and the task of delivering the baby inevitably fell on her. At this moment, Tsunade was holding a little doll carved out of jade in her hand. Its black eyes were moving nimbly, and its delicate skin was as white as snow. It was no different from Kagaya, and there were two cute horns on its head. Staring blankly at the tender child in Tsunade's arms, Dustless spontaneously felt a sense of blood connection, and an inexplicable special force connected him and the baby in swaddling clothes. Yaya. It seemed that it also felt a sense of intimacy with Dustless, and the tender baby waved at Dustless with its fangs and claws. Its dark eyes were sparkling with tears, and it was anxious to get out of Tsunade's arms. It looked like it was about to cry, and it evoked the sympathy and pity that had disappeared for countless years in Dustless's heart. Heartless little brat, wasting so much of my energy. You forgot about the midwife when you saw your father. Tsunade rolled her eyes and angrily handed the baby in her arms to Dustless. She put her hands on her hips and shouted, "This heartless little girl is as heartless as you. No wonder you are father and daughter. You don't know how to express your gratitude to me. After all, I was the one who delivered the baby. Even if there is no credit, there should be hard work." Tsunade complained with dissatisfaction. This little girl was too much. She cried and made a fuss in her arms, but when she was in Dustless's hands, she immediately smiled. Seeing that Dustless and the baby in his arms were so close, Tsunade's calm eyes were filled with jealousy. Then she walked to Dustless's side, and her slender fingers gently pinched the little girl's little face and teased. "Is it a girl?" Remembering what Tsunade said before, he subconsciously looked down at the lower body. Sure enough, as Tsunade said, the future will definitely be a beautiful young lady. Quietly looking at the little girl's dark pupils, Dustless was confused. He felt that this day came unexpectedly, and he didn't even do the most basic preparation. When he was daydreaming, he suddenly felt a wet face, and his empty thoughts suddenly came back to him. Haji. In the twinkling of an eye, Wu Chen's face was left with the little girl's mouth mark, which was full of water stains. Wu Chen didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In his life, it was the first time that his face was attacked by others. This little girl is very clever. Tsunade's eyes widened, and her watery eyes looked at the little girl in surprise. For a moment, she caught a cunning look that didn't belong to her age from those black eyes. "Nonsense! Don't you know whose flesh and blood you are?" Hearing this, Dustless's face was full of pride, and his high tone was filled with endless pride. This little girl can be seen from her eyes that she's a clever little girl. It's my fault that my genes are too strong, and so is my daughter. Chapter 566. Looking at the radiant and spirited Dustless, Tsunade was also filled with emotion for a while. After Dustless's former enemies saw his expression, they would probably crawl out of hell unwillingly. In his impression, Dustless was just a villain who did not commit any of the 10 evils. "Bring it over for me to see." A weak and light voice spread out and entered the ears of Dustless and Tsunade. Turning their heads, the owner of this weak voice was Kagaya, who was sweating all over. At this moment, her face was pale, revealing a sense of helplessness from her soul. The birth of Smarty had almost exhausted all the effort she had accumulated in her life. Compared to Dustless, who only worried but didn't put in any effort, Huey had sacrificed too much. Yeah. Little Smarty's clear eyes looked at Huey G and blinked. From Huey G's kind eyes, she caught a glimpse of love and gentleness. The immature but powerful body twisted again, and he raised his thin arms and threw himself into Kagaya's arms. Obviously, he was tired of Dustless. Poochie! Tsunade couldn't help laughing when she saw this scene. Her delicate face bloomed with a beautiful smile, and her bell-like laughter was pleasant to listen to. She teased Dustless with interest. You forgot your father when you had your mother. It seems that you were just like that. It is the nature of babies to look for their mother's care. Handing the child in his hand to Kagaya, Dustless did not deny Tsunade's words. It was indeed as she said. It's been hard on you. Staring at Kagaya with complex gratitude, Dustless's tone was as heavy as Mount Tai, and his bright eyes looked at Kagaya. His words were completely from the bottom of his heart, and there was no hypocrisy. It's okay. You can recover after a while. Taking the immature baby in Dustless's hand, Kagaya nodded slightly with a sweet smile on her face. She can naturally feel Dustless's sincerity. A sincere greeting was far more useful than thousands of hypocritical sweet words. Speaking of which, what's this little girl's name? Her eyes fell on Dustless's body. Tsunade frowned and asked. The little clever boy came and went for a short time, but after a long time, it sounded very harsh. Isn't that obvious? Dustless rolled his eyes at Tsunade and said bluntly, Children follow their father's surname. This is a principle that has never changed since ancient times. Of course, it's called Uchiha. Suddenly, two cold eyes locked on him. Wu Chen's words came to an abrupt end. One of them was Kagaya, and the other was Otsutsuki Haruo, who was rushing over. It's really strange. These two women's tempers have always been at odds. It's rare for them to have the same opinion today. Dustless thought helplessly in his heart. At the same time, he couldn't help but feel extremely conflicted. He had already guessed that the naming process, which should have been smooth, was the most difficult process. I think the surname should be Otsutsuki. The Uchiha surname is indeed glorious, but it's already a thing of the past. Now, everything has changed, and I'm in a foreign country. All in all, there's no need to respect those ridiculous truths. Glancing at Dustless, Haruo said her intention, and the determination in her eyes was unshakable. What you said is true. Kagaya nodded towards Dustless to express her point of view. From the beginning to the end, Kagaya has maintained a contemptuous attitude towards Uchiha. It's just a branch of Otsutsuki, and as Haruo said before, there's no need to adhere to the rules in a foreign country. Yaiya, seeing that she was ignored, the little girl's inarticulate voice sounded. She seemed to hear the conversation between several people and quite agreed with Haruo's statement. Seeing this, Dustless's forehead was full of black lines. Dustless can't change the principles summarized by the ancient sages at will, and the idea of children following their father's surname has been deeply ingrained. It's impossible to change Dustless easily. Ahem, clearing his throat, Dustless chuckled and said, It doesn't matter. I'm a very democratic person. What the surname is, it will be decided by her in the future. Pointing to the baby in Kagaya's arms, Dustless said, If you're democratic, you should vote. Looking at Dustless with disdain, Tsunade said contemptuously. She knew that Dustless deliberately played Taiji Fist to fool her. In the future, as long as she is tempted a little, this little girl may change sides and jump into Dustless's arms. Children are always naive. Up to you. Huey clearly didn't want to dwell on such a question. She just focused on teasing the red-faced Smarty, occasionally letting out crisp laughter. Everyone, including Dustless and Yulua Tsuna, looked at the scene in front of them harmoniously. When the cold Kagaya revealed his kind face, it was no less than the sun rising from the south. She'll be called Yushi from now on. After a moment of silence, Wu Chun gave him a name. It was not appropriate to call him that. Even if he didn't have a surname, he needed a name. Otsutsuki Suki or Uchiha Suki. Sounds good, but is there any special meaning? Yuluo nodded in satisfaction after trying to read it 2 or 3 times. Then, he turned to Dustless and asked expectantly. This name was indeed not bad and sounded quite elegant. Huey G also hummed the new name of Little Smarty. After a while, she revealed a knowing smile. It seemed that she was quite satisfied with the name Dustless gave her. However, the baby in her arms puffed up her cheeks and bared her fangs at Dustless. She seemed to be extremely dissatisfied, but her protest was ignored by everyone. Meaning? Is this necessary? Just say it smoothly. Dustless was speechless by Yuluo's question, and he went straight to the point. After the words fell, even Kagaya stared at Dustless with dissatisfaction. The name has been the most important thing since ancient times. She didn't expect Dustless to be so perfunctory. Dustless felt as if he had been shot, even though he was lying down. Only then did he suddenly remember that compared to him, a surpasser from the third dimension, people like Kagaya were still considered old antiques. It was indeed difficult for him to accept the idea of transcending dimensions. Chapter 567. There was an insurmountable gap between the thinking of modern people and ancient people. It was impossible for them to accept Dustless's thinking ability in a short period of time. After hundreds and thousands of years of changes, the generation gap was not something that could be ignored. Fortunately, after a while of talking, Kagaya and the others reluctantly accepted Dustless's proposed name, just as Dustless explained before. The name was not important. The most important thing was to communicate with each other. The key was the meaning. Although the explanation was extremely far-fetched, after some coaxing and pestering, the girls nodded in agreement. Dustless originally wanted to let Kagaya and her daughter see the outside world. Being trapped in the system space for a long time was not a long-term solution, but Kagaya unexpectedly refused. The reason was quite simple. With the addition of the little life form Yushi, Huey's boring life was no longer monotonous. Compared to before, it was much more colorful and interesting. Her ambition that could swallow the heavens and devour the earth slowly faded. Forget it, looking at the mother and daughter entangled in harmony with each other, Dustless also stopped the plan to take little Yueshi out. This was too cruel and unfair to Kagaya, and Dustless did not have the skills to take care of children. It was enough to let her live quietly and peacefully. You're too easily satisfied. Also, my dream is still a bubble. Seeing Dustless's complacent expression, Yuluo was quite dissatisfied. She did not hide the blame in her tone. The plan in her mind to give birth to a nest of children had not been realized yet. Just go with the flow. You also know that this kind of thing depends on fate. In short, you can't blame me. Dustless shrugged, with an expression that had nothing to do with him. Yuluo's mouth twitched and gloomily stared at Dustless. No one was an idiot. Dustless's words implied that there was a problem with her body. She wanted to refute, but there was no way to refute. Dustless and Kagaya hit the mark, and countless times with her, there was no movement at all. This had already quietly explained everything. This is an illness. It has to be treated. Dustless gently patted Yuluo's shoulder and said with a smile. The ridicule in his tone was not concealed at all, following which his body dissipated without any warning like a breeze, forever disappearing from this world. In an instant, he disappeared without a trace, and his aura was completely gone. Warm sunlight poured down from the 9 heavens. The whole world was bathed in the scorching sun. It was full of vitality and vitality. It made people temporarily forget that this was an extremely distorted world. Coincidentally, some people were not used to this warm sun. The Akagami, red hair, pirates who had escaped from death, were desolate and bleak. The momentum that swept the sea in the past was gone with the wind. The battleships docked at the coast were almost destroyed. Looking at it, it was full of traces of the waves. In the past, the Akagami, red hair, pirates were domineering, traversing the 4 seas, sweeping the New World and stepping on the top of the Yonko for emperors. Now, only a few of them were left. It was exactly the same as the saying, when one reaches the pinnacle of prosperity, one will inevitably decline. It was all because of that man's single thought that brought disaster to his name. Years of dreams, painstaking efforts, all turned into nothing in an instant. He was even reduced to a state where he was about to be erased. New world, I will definitely come back again. The powerful oath resounded through the sky. Akagami, red hair. Shanks then left with the remaining crew members, and a lonely shadow gradually lengthened and disappeared on the sea. Dustless, the originator of the Akagami, red hair, pirates, was extremely proud. People were in high spirits when they were happy, and sometimes he would show a knowing smile. This made Hancock think that the sun had emerged from the bottom of the sea. On the balcony, Dustless was lying on the couch. The birth of Little Moon, she really made him in a good mood, and his mouth was humming a song involuntarily. He didn't even notice the sudden appearance of a figure. This time there may be a chance. Doflamingo's eyes squinted, and he peeped at Dustless's expression without a trace. There was a smile on his face, and he was still a wanted pirate. Although the position of Shichibukai was still a step away, it was only a short distance away. Dustless didn't help him add fuel to the fire, and it would be difficult for him to get to the top. In the near future, I will help you get the position of Shichibukai as soon as possible. We must seize the throne of King Dressrosa as soon as possible and drag the original Liku royal family down from the altar. Before Doflamingo could speak, Dustless spoke first, and his cold voice was filled with killing intent. It's true that we should speed up the pace. Caesar seems to have been caught by Sakazuki, but in the end, thanks to your help, the old boy would have to go to prison again. Doflamingo smiled flatteringly, and his tone was full of flattery, and he had completely given up this so-called dignity. It's not too late to pick up his dignity when his wings grow hard in the future. Now he's just a stray dog. The identity of the celestial dragons doesn't have much of a deterrent effect on the Gorosei, 5 Elder Stars. What's more, their Don Quixote family has no power of the celestial dragons. If they lose the protection of Dustless, they will die. It's not just him. Caesar is the same, so Doflamingo is unusually obedient. Glancing at Doflamingo faintly, Dustless didn't say anything. It was the opposite of the way he met Hancock before. In the face of these subordinates who are not subordinates, the necessary oppression is still necessary. The reason why he chose to let Doflamingo sit on the Shichibukai in advance is entirely because Caesar's trace is exposed. The construction of Pluton must have a quiet environment. Only after Doflamingo sits on the Shichibukai, he can also seek the king's position of Dressrosa to shelter Caesar. What are the specific steps? Lowering his posture, Doflamingo asked in a low voice. It's very simple. Lead your pirate group to destroy everything. The loss is enough to make the Marines unable to bear it. At that time, they will naturally come to you to compromise. It doesn't matter if it's big. Behind me is your foothold. The simplest and most effective way is to be rude and direct. This is the truth that will never change. Chapter 568. Getting the promise he dreamed of. Doflamingo left Mariewa with a wild laugh, and the unscrupulous laughter seemed to mock the helpless and angry look of the Navy after being attacked by him. In the dark, Doflamingo has seen the old face of Fleet Admiral Sengoku. On the balcony, Dustless glanced indifferently at the battleships sailing away, and he could even see that Doflamingo was standing on the deck. "Master, aren't you spoiling him too much?" Hancock, dressed in a maid's uniform, came quietly and gently massaged Dustless's shoulders on both sides, and the technique was extremely accurate. Doflamingo is ambitious, like a wolf or a tiger, and it is common for dogs to bite their masters in the end. Dustless closed his eyes comfortably and enjoyed it comfortably. After a while, Hancock's massage skills improved by leaps and bounds, and the fatigue on both sides of his shoulders was swept away. "Don't worry, it's just a small pawn." Hearing this, Dustless replied casually, and his indifferent tone obviously never put Doflamingo in his heart. No matter how beautiful the Monkey King's conspiracy is, Even if it is flawless, under the shroud of the Five-Finger Mountain, he is always insignificant, just a tiny particle among hundreds of millions of floating particles. The consequence of a mere Taowu wanting to shake the world was like a moth flying into a flame, seeking its own destruction. If he could be tactful, Dustless didn't mind continuing to raise Doflamingo. If he dared to resist, within a breath, Doflamingo's blood would splatter 3 feet and his head would be taken. So there's no need to worry about it. Just use it with contempt. What's more, that kid has been suppressed by me for so long, and the hidden wildness in his heart and the anger that has been accumulated for a long time in the past few days has released extraordinary destructive power. A mad dog that goes crazy. Sengoku will be troubled. Taking the crystal glass handed by Hancock, shaking the red liquid in it, Dustless then drank it, and the red residue left on the corner of his mouth combined with his gloomy face was particularly strange. He was the complete opposite of the sunny Dustless from before. Now, he was like a demon in human skin. Dustless was able to put himself in the shoes of those who were truly loyal to him and treat them calmly. As for insignificant characters like Doflamingo, it was fine to throw him away when he had no value. Doflamingo was only temporarily attached to Dustless. In the future, when his wings were fully grown, he would leave him. When this chess piece no longer had any value, it would not be too late to kill him. After losing the restraint of Dustless, Doflamingo, the ferocious tiger beast, finally revealed its sharp fangs and devoured one Navy battleship after another. The bloody storm set off by Don Quixote swept across the world, and the entire Marine headquarters was covered with an unprecedented dark cloud. Bastard Doflamingo, this beast, one day I will tear him to pieces to vent the hatred in my heart. The angry Sengoku tore the information in his hand, his eyes were bloody red, and his whole body was releasing a huge oppressive aura, and the whole office was shaking. Bah! After swallowing confidential documents, the goat whined twice and fainted. Doflamingo was a celestial dragon. Even though the Don Quixote clan had given up the privilege of being a celestial dragon, Doflamingo was still a celestial dragon from the beginning to the end. This identity alone was enough to render them helpless, not to mention the mastermind behind him. This damn ant was obviously extremely fragile, but he always jumped around and ignored the Marine, and even smacked the Marine's face. Sengoku's feelings were self-evident. This was the feeling of having to suffer in silence, unable to voice out the bitterness. Humph! Boom! Caca! Staring coldly at the proud and arrogant Doflamingo in the newspaper, Sengoku saw Doflamingo laughing at the Marine. He didn't even think about it. He condensed the original transparent air shield in his hand and directly shattered it, turning it into goose feather-like fluttering snow. Bang, bang, bang. The dull sound of knocking on the door made Sengoku frown. When did the Marine become so unruly? When he was about to verbally reprimand, a tall figure directly broke the door. That guy Z left Marin on a battleship. Without waiting for Sengoku to ask, Garp, who was wearing a dog-head hat, said. Hearing this, Sengoku frowned deeply, and his voice was hoarse, and he said seriously, his students were slaughtered by that bastard Doflamingo yesterday. Maybe he went to find trouble with Doflamingo. Yesterday, the Marine ship unfortunately encountered Doflamingo, and almost all of them were killed, and only a few escaped. With such deep hatred, how can Z swallow his anger? A few years ago, Z's wife and son were brutally killed by pirates. At that time, he hated pirates, and now the new hatred plus the old hatred aroused the flame in Z's heart. The destination of that guy's voyage is not the sea where Doflamingo is located. Garp shook his head. Sengoku suddenly looked at Garp with his pupils enlarged, and his old eyes were filled with awe-inspiring luster. A bad idea swept through his mind, and his fists were as big as a bucket. Looking at Sengoku's eyes, Garp nodded and said in a heavy tone, Z is likely to take the students who survived to Mariehua to question the man. Z knows that temporarily repelling Doflamingo won't solve the root of the problem. Only by completely stopping Roy South can he stop Doflamingo's plot against the Marine. But Z is a very intelligent and sensitive man. He shouldn't fight with him, so there is no need to worry, Garp said with uncertainty. He also had doubts about what he said, but he just hoped so. Sengoku smiled bitterly and regretted for a while. If he had given the position of 7 warlords of the sea to Doflamingo, there would not be such a situation. Chapter 569. Early in the morning 3 days later, the bloody storm set off by Doflamingo still continued. The fierce name of Heaven's Yiksha spread throughout the New World. Even small places like the Four Seas could hear his nickname. Countless Navy battleships were destroyed by him, and countless Navy soldiers were killed by him. Not only that, Doflamingo's claws also reached out to ordinary civilians. The Marine could only swallow their anger, not to mention these weak civilians. Therefore, the number of islands and towns destroyed by Doflamingo was more than the number of hands. Fleet Admiral Sengoku, who couldn't bear it, finally gave the title of Shichibukai to Doflamingo. Although he couldn't wait to tear him into pieces, he didn't dare to kill him. The name of Tenryubito was too terrible. The law did not allow the Marine to kill Tenryubito. Afterward, Doflamingo also became Shichibukai. On the Blue Sea, Marine battleships moved forward rapidly. The sea rippled and expanded to swallow the surrounding sea. Damn Doflamingo! Z's heavy roar sounded in the cabin. His hands slightly smashed the table in front of him. It was as easy as blowing air. Only in this way could he vent the burning flames in his heart. This is the so-called Marine. What kind of justice is this? Or is the definition of justice the winner is king and the loser is a bandit? Is this the justice I pursue? Z's eyes were dim. For the first time in his life, he doubted his faith. Marine headquarters held the loud slogan of absolute justice all day long. But their inner nature was no different from those pirates. They were afraid of the strong bullying the weak. The strong preyed on the weak, and the strong was respected. When the law of the jungle forced the word justice, the surface did not change, but the inside was rotten. His beloved student was slaughtered by pirates. As the embodiment of justice, the Marine couldn't crusade against evil. Not only that, but now from Marine's predicament, to a large extent, they will collude with the so-called Shichibukai in the future. This is not the righteous Marine that Z pursued. It is contrary to his beliefs. In the past, he was confident that the Marine has fallen into hell. Teacher, a haggard and weak voice came from outside the cabin. Z raised his head and pushed open the cabin door. A group of exhausted students were reflected in his eyes. His old eyes swept across the students one by one. Z lowered his head, his face full of guilt. In the end, I also chose to give in. I am not qualified to criticize Sengoku. Z said with a forced smile. Doflamingo acted recklessly, slaughtering the Marine Corps like slaughtering dogs. Countless soldiers were wailing and trembling under his hands. Z didn't stand up to arrest Doflamingo. Just like when his chess piece was killed, he chose to remain silent. Why did he choose to remain silent? There was no other reason. Doflamingo was a celestial dragon, and behind him was Lois South, a behemoth that could cover the sky with one hand. Z's thoughts of revenge were extinguished, and he continued to remain silent. Because they are celestial dragons. In this world, celestial dragons are synonymous with justice. The laws of the world are all made by them. Justice is judged by them. So is life and death. Those who resist their rule are the enemies of justice. In other words, the enemies of celestial dragons are the embodiment of evil. Z, who believes that justice will prevail, will certainly not resist celestial dragons. In today's world, celestial dragons have become a manifestation of justice. Only by respecting celestial dragons is justice. Resistance is evil. Such a ridiculous truth has deceived the world for more than 800 years. But no one can jump out of the nightmare created by justice. Until now, Z felt like it was a lifetime ago. He suddenly woke up. The justice that I seek is sacred, not this kind of twisted justice that has been rewritten by others. staring at the looming Mariewa in the clouds in the distance. Z's loud roar contained the firmness of a rock. The ruthlessness of celestial dragons is well known to the world. They are evil butchers dressed in the cloak of justice. They themselves are the dirtiest existence. The Marine is also an accomplice to evil. Z, who was a Marine admiral in the past, is no exception. Therefore, Z has an amazing conclusion. The most evil existence in the world is not pirates, nor is it the Yonko for emperors, but the forces led by celestial dragons. They are the most evil existence in the world. In the name of hypocritical justice, their shadows cover the sky and the sun. The scope of slavery is more than an island and a small piece of the sea. The location of radiation is the whole world. Today, Z realized that compared to those pirates who chase their dreams, he who was loyal to the world government and loyal to celestial dragons in the past was more evil. In the early morning, Mariewa was filled with countless mist, looming in the clouds and mist, connecting the sky and the earth. It was beautiful. Mariewa is not only the headquarters of the world government, but also the gathering place of celestial dragons. It covers a large area and is difficult to estimate. Looking as far as the eye can see, Mariewa standing on a red line is spectacular. Looking at the world today, it is unique, and its momentum is unique. The Marine battleship actually took the initiative to come to Mariewa. It's rare. His sharp eyes penetrated the heavy fog, and the galloping Marine battleship appeared in Dustless's eyes. After a glance, Dustless withdrew his gaze. He was very busy these days. Most of the time was spent in the world of the system. Accompanying Kagaya all day and playing with little Ueshi was boring, but it was also a good way to spend a long time. Just as he was about to get into the system world, the sound of the din-din mushy in his arms came into Dustless's ears. He frowned slightly and then took out the black din-din mushy. This is Z. Was he looking for me for? Or is it for Doflamingo? The doubts in his eyes turned into speculation. Dustless learned that Doflamingo recently killed many of Z's students. Chapter 570. Time slipped away unknowingly, and in the blink of an eye, 5 hours passed quietly. In the spacious and bright room, Dustless looked doubtful, and his deep black eyes restored indifference. He was sure that Z's visit was not a good thing. The weasel paying a visit to the chicken is not a good thing. Doflamingo's recent lawlessness, Dustless also heard a little about it. But in his view, it was just a small fuss. The effect was negligible. Unexpectedly, Sengoku chose to compromise and agreed to Doflamingo's conditions and promised him the position of Shichibukai. I'm afraid that old guy is also tormented to the point that he can't stand it anymore. Dustless had some admiration for this clown, Doflamingo. Doflamingo ambushed the Marines. Most of them were young and had good qualifications. Once these people grow up in the future, their room for improvement is infinite. Even one or two of them can become the mainstay of the Marines, turning into fertile soil to protect the towering tree of the Marines. However, Doflamingo had cut him in half at the waist and killed him mercilessly. More than 90% of the freshmen were taught by Z, and they get along with each other day and night. Their feelings must have reached a very deep level, and even reached a deep level of father and son. So that's how it is. You know it's useless to deal with Doflamingo, so you came to me, giving up what's close at hand to seek what's far away. Wu Chen's gentle expression was full of contempt. He instantly understood Z's intention. But, do you think it's useful to find me? Relying on your strength, you want me to yield? That's a fantasy, Z. Frankly speaking, Dustless quite sympathized with him. He worked hard for the Marines all his life, and when his life was about to wither, it was his student Borsellino Kazu who personally sent him to his death. The rise and fall of the Marines are caused by the Marines, and they're destroyed by the Marines. His feelings are pitiful, his actions are excusable, but his crime is punishable. Dustless sneered. A tall and broad figure walked in. He had purple hair and wore glasses. If one ignored the cold glint in his eyes, he was dressed quite elegantly. The two of them looked at each other. Because of sitting on the stairs, Dustless was taller than Z. Dustless was looking down at him. First of all, Z's aura was already at a disadvantage, which made him quite uncomfortable. I still remember that you were the honorary admiral of the Marine, so why did you choose to be the enemy of justice? Clenching his fists, countless blue veins were vaguely visible on his arms. Z coldly questioned, "What Doflamingo did was the result of your indulgence and indifference." At the end of his speech, Z's eyes were emitting cold air. Towards Doflamingo, Z couldn't wait to tear him into pieces. Unless he directly killed him, he wouldn't be able to solve the problem. You came all the way here. Sit down and soothe your throat first. Pointing to the left side of the sofa, Dustless signaled Z to sit there. As for the cold, questioning tone, he ignored it and quietly tasted the fragrant tea in his hand. As if nothing happened, Dustless was unusually quiet. This kind of indifference made Z's resentment towards Dustless soar. Justice? Z, you are not young anymore. All day long you still talk about justice. Sometimes I really feel like you are a child who hasn't grown up. Looking at Z, Wu Chun sneered and didn't hide his sarcasm. I think you're a child who hasn't grown up. You don't understand the essence of justice. Z's old face tightened. He didn't hesitate to show weakness. Then tell me your understanding of justice. I'm all ears. The corners of his mouth curled up with a hint of ridicule. That pair of deep eyes flashed with ridicule, as if he was sizing up a clown, looking down at Z from above. Their identities were suddenly reversed. Dustless was more like a deep audience, quietly waiting for the clown's performance on the stage. What kind of attitude is this? Z's tone raised a few decibels as he said, in an even more oppressive tone. Dustless's indifference and even contempt had touched Z's bottom line. His student was killed. Dustless not only didn't show any sign of remorse, this cold and perfunctory attitude made Z feel contempt. This is my attitude towards the justice you speak of. It doesn't matter who is right or wrong, because the final say is not in their hands. Lightly glancing at Z, Dustless said without any emotion, "What is justice?" When you ignore this inherent definition, you will find that the one who can judge evil and justice is actually the one with the biggest fist. Justice? The winner is the justice. It's so simple. For example, Dustless's mouth raised a cold arc. His body disappeared in an instant and disappeared into the darkness. His speed has reached the realm of perfection, escaping the perception of Z's observation hockey. This guy is using some kind of ability to move, not relying on the speed of his body. Z's body stiffened. Now my fist is bigger than yours, so I can judge that you are an evil person. If I say you are guilty, then you are guilty. A demonic whisper entered Z's ears, followed by a flash of golden light. Armament hockey hardening. With a low shout, the surface of his body was replaced by a dark color. Z had long predicted that Dustless would take the opportunity to use armament hockey. Clang! An ear-piercing boom spread throughout the entire room, and an invisible ripple spread out, causing everyone to feel dizzy. All the decorations in the room instantly exploded. Ka-ka-ka. Under the impact of the brute force, the geographical position of the entire room was dislocated. Despicable. Knowing that Dustless is an ability user, Z's right arm was also covered with armament hockey. His fist was enough to smash a giant building, and he mercilessly punched his head. Ugh. Chapter 571. Z was shocked and angry. He originally wanted to persuade Dustless to stop and restrain Doflamingo, but he didn't expect Dustless to reach for a yard after getting an inch. Just because of a verbal disagreement, Dustless attacked. He turned his face faster than flipping a book. Ka-ka-ka. The powerful fist that was enough to crush a Navy warship suddenly fell on Dustless. He didn't dodge, and his brain exploded in an instant. The ground was splashed with dark red bloodstains. The scene was extremely bloody and violent. He was blown out of shape. That's impossible. Instead of feeling happy, Z tightened his nerves. His observation hockey spread out, guarding the surrounding environment. If Dustless could be killed so easily, he would have died hundreds of times. When he first came to Mariewa, he was defeated by Dustless. Even if Z used all his strength at that time, he was still afraid of Dustless's power. At that time, Dustless didn't break out all his strength. The humans in your world are really monsters. Physical skills can be practiced to such a terrifying level. It's obvious that you're already in your twilight years, but still have such a powerful strength. Incredible. Z's voice was full of praise. Then he saw that Wu Chan was still sitting in his original position and was still savoring the fragrant tea in his hand. He was sizing up Z from a bird's eye view. When he turned around, he saw that Wu Chan had disappeared in a thin air. The bloodstains on the ground also disappeared. It was as if nothing had happened. Everything was back to the original problem. Not only that, Z also felt an abnormal pain in his arm. This guy, when did he do it? I was the one who defeated him. So why is this happening? Z's eyes solidified, looking at his smoking arm. His gloomy face was hard to hide. He can penetrate the defense made by my armament hockey. Has he reached such a level at such a young age? Looking up, Z saw that Z's right arm has been completely penetrated. The wound was as big as a thumb. It was obviously a scorching type attack. The wound has been burned, and it's only a minor injury. Was what just happened an illusion? For the first time in his life, Z felt that his eyes were blurred and there was visual confusion. Reality and illusion are often only separated by a single thought. Everything is like the moon in the water. What you see is only the reflection of the light in the water. It is only a pure illusion. Seeing Z's face full of hesitation and bewilderment, Wu Chan explained in a soft voice. Just a few casual words, but it contained the truth of the world. Z suddenly became enlightened. He looked up at Dustless, who was close at hand. Even if it only takes a few short steps to reach Dustless, the gap between them gave Z a sense of powerlessness. Even if it was only a few inches, Z was sure that as long as Wu Chan wanted to, he would never be able to touch him. This was not a gap in strength, but a huge gap in dimension. It was a gap that was difficult to cross just by relying on hard work. Why didn't you kill me? You can injure me, which means you can take my life. Z asked in a deep voice. His tone was full of puzzlement and deep doubts. Carefully looking at the small wound on his arm, Z suddenly understood that this was not a life and death battle, but more like a fight between children. Dustless casually smiled and didn't want to be serious. Casually playing around is fine. There is no need to fight to the death. Z was shocked that he was like a powerless clown. He couldn't make waves. He could only be controlled by Dustless. He was even sure that if he wanted to, he would have been killed on the spot by Dustless. Your life will naturally be taken by someone else. That's all. Staring at Z with deep meaning, Dustless shook his head without leaving a trace. He can see that Z loves the Marine very much. For this, he was willing to give up his life. Today, he dared to face Dustless head-on. This shows that he is willing to give up everything. However, in the later days, such a person who loved the Marines so much without any hesitation hated the entire Marine headquarters to the bone. He wanted to get rid of it as soon as possible. The huge contrast really makes people feel that the world is fickle and the fate of many ghosts. There is no need to kill you because Doflamingo has become one of the Shichibukai. His thumb slightly hooked and a newspaper floated in front of Z. The content that caught his eyes was the laughing Doflamingo. At this moment, he has become a member of the Shichibukai organization. Z looked at Doflamingo and the newspaper. His previous worldview gradually collapsed. He didn't expect that Doflamingo, this kind of butcher, could join the Shichibukai organization. A large number of Marine rookies died in his hands. How can this garbage join the Shichibukai to show off? He killed countless Marines and didn't get the punishment he deserved. How can Z accept this? Most of the Marine interns who were killed were his students. If you want to blame someone, blame your own fate. Z. Staring at Z's pale face, Dustless had some sympathy for him. Z in front of him was like a candle in the wind, extremely fragile. The Marine who was loyal to him betrayed him. It's not hard to imagine how he would feel. I'm afraid he is completely disappointed and desperate. This kind of thing can't be accepted by anyone. This guy's heart is very broad. Wu Chan secretly said in his heart. He admired Z a little more. If someone dared to betray him, even if he chased him to the ends of the earth, Wu Chun would tear him into pieces as a warning to others. Unknowingly, Zi's mentality began to quietly change. For the Marines he loved in the past, his heart's desire to protect them gradually decreased. There was even a bit of hatred in his heart. However, he still suppressed this irritable feeling of resentment. Dustless saw this and just smiled. The reason why Z betrayed the Marine is not because of other factors, but because he was forced to embark on this thorny road of no return. Chapter 572. Z almost collapsed. He didn't expect the Marine to be so unbearable. He didn't choose to resist, but shamefully bowed his head. It also indirectly means that his students who died in the battle are doomed to be unable to avenge them and can only swallow their anger. Thinking about the future, Doflamingo, this kind of evil person can continue to bring disaster to the world intact. Z's forehead had a ferocious veins undulating, and his steady breathing also became coarse. Z's mind was in a trance. In the unseen world, he could hear the souls of the fallen students. Their unwilling and mournful cries pierced through his ears and into his brain, driving his will. Dying in the hands of pirates can be said to be a disguised form of martyrdom. Falling in the hands of Shichibukai will only make them a laughingstock, because to some extent they can be regarded as one of us. See off the guest. After glancing at Z, Dustless closed his eyes and said casually. Dustless turned a deaf ear to Z's offensive impulse. He is a Marine Admiral-level character, and he is indeed a tragic character. Forgiving him once is not a big deal. Please. Hancock made an elegant gesture to Z, indicating that Z can leave. Z's cold eyes looked at Dustless. He seemed to be hesitating whether to leave or not, but after glancing at the Marine battleship docked in the harbor, he resolutely turned and left. This old guy is so tactful. Seeing Z simply turn around and leave, Wu Chun opened his eyes. Z gave him a simple feeling that he was the type of stubborn old man. He was the type of old man who would stick to the rules. Whiz. Suddenly there was a strong wind in front of him. Dustless was slightly surprised. He immediately raised his eyelids and saw the tall body of Z, who took the opportunity to attack. Boom, boom, boom. The powerful fist blasted over with full force. Just as it was about to crush Dustless, his entire person strangely disappeared. It was as if he had completely integrated into the void, disappearing without a trace in an instant. I knew you wouldn't leave so easily. Z turned to look at Dustless, whose left eye turned into Sharingan, and sneered. When facing pirates, have you ever seen a Marine Admiral who fled without fighting? Subconsciously, Z has classified Wu Chun as a type of pirate. Even compared to the pirates who commit all kinds of crimes, he knows how to use the power given by the government to be more evil. Z felt that using the word pirate to describe Wu Chun was simply an insult to the word. Marine Admiral who fled without fighting? Maybe there will be one in the history of the Marine today. A demonic whisper sounded in Z's ears, and Dustless was not in a hurry to fight his opponent. If I didn't guess wrong, when you went to Mariewa, you also brought your students who were struggling at death's door. Looking at Z's strong body, Dustless said with a smile. You bastard, don't tell me you want to. Hearing this, Z's eyes were about to split open. His eyes were burning with flames. He wasn't an idiot. What Wu Chun meant was that he was going to make a move on that group of students. A peerless master without the slightest cultivation, despicable to such a shameless degree, he would choose to attack a group of students who have no power to truss a chicken. This is the first time Z has seen it. Ka. Without thinking, Z broke the window and jumped out of the 2-meter-high window. His body fell straight to the ground and swept toward the battleship docked on the shore like a hurricane. Z was determined to protect the remaining students, even if he had to risk his life. This old guy is really fickle. He just said that there is no Marine Admiral who retreats without fighting, and now he is running away. Staring at the black ink spots that have gradually disappeared in the distance, Dustless touched his forehead and seemed quite helpless. His tangled tone seemed to be a headache for Z. Young master, when did you send someone to attack his crew? Hancock elegantly stood beside Dustless, tilted her head, and curiously asked. Dustless didn't contact anyone for a quarter of an hour. When did he order his men to attack Z's fleet? She was really curious. Attack? I didn't send anyone to attack. I just used Z's mentality to worry about his companions. In the final analysis, he is still a righteous person. In his eyes, the lives of the students are more important than mine, so he was so impatient. Dustless replied calmly. He was just using Z's mentality to make a sneak attack. If at this moment Z was replaced by Akainu, he wouldn't care about this group of people. Anyway, it's just a few insignificant pawns. It's not a big deal. No one will care about it. Every day, there are countless soldiers all over the world dying in battle. Master, you are really cunning. Hancock didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She didn't expect Dustless to be so proficient in playing tricks. But will he go and come back? Her eyes fell on Dustless's body. Hancock asked with concern. Z's strength was unfathomable, and the entire Mariawa might be destroyed by the fight. Of course, this is only the case where the five deliberately indulge. Well, thinking of Z's nature, Wu Chen's eyes flashed with a bone-piercing cold light. He sneered. I've given him a chance. If that old guy really comes back, then I'll take his little life. The sonorous and powerful voice contains confidence. Z is very powerful. Dustless also has 100% certainty to take him down. No one can pose much threat to him. But then again, Doflamingo's next goal is the king of Dressrosa. With his forehead squeezed together, Dustless remembered that Doflamingo has become a Shichibukai. I am afraid that his next plan is to seek the position of the king of Dressrosa. Caesar can also secretly create Pluto under his protection. Perfect and consolidate Dustless's ambition to unify the world. Chapter 573. Returning to the battleship, Z's face was twitching. The students were snoring and sleeping. There was saliva on the corners of their mouths. Their expressions were rich and comfortable. Obviously, they were having a good dream. Who is that guy? Looking at the direction of Dustless's villa, Z's heart was mixed. He knew that this was Dustless' intention to let him go. Z was also prepared to die in battle, but he didn't expect Dustless to play this kind of trick. No matter from any point of view, this is an unsolvable dead end. After thinking about it for a while, Z no longer entangled himself. There is a saying that it was better to live than to die. Since he knew that Wu Chan intended to let him go, it was impossible for him to foolishly go back to die. After resting for about half a day, Z chose to leave Mariehua. These remaining students were really tired and needed to be given time to relax. Looking around, Z's current students, many of them will become the future mainstays, such as Smoker, who has outstanding strength. They are all here. Above the tall building, looking down at the battleship far away, even if it has become a tiny black, Dustless can see it clearly under his eyes. For him, distance is just a concept. Separated from each other by the ends of the earth, it is also insignificant. It seems that you are not a reckless man. Retracting his gaze, Dustless walked into the room with light steps. A huge narrow map came into view, and it was densely covered with red and white flags. White represents the Navy, while red represents the pirates. The whole map is almost occupied by the red pirate flag, everywhere in the four seas, as well as the New World. The power is far larger than Marine. It is a behemoth that can crush Marine. With such a big disadvantage, the Marines should have been strangled. The actual reason why they were able to survive until now was because the pirates were in a state of disunity. Otherwise, if all their forces were concentrated, the Marines would have been wiped out forever. In the future, the Yonko, for Emperor's Whitebeard pirates, almost destroyed the Marine headquarters. The power of all the pirates in the world can be imagined. How to lead one's own forces to survive was indeed a question worthy of consideration. Although Dustless's current strength could be said to be invincible, nothing was absolute. There is absolutely nothing wrong with taking a long-term view. The next step should be to obtain Dressrosa, to help that old brat Doflamingo ascend the throne. His gaze fell on the narrow island of Dressrosa. Dustless's eyes, which were usually calm, were filled with the flames of ambition. The weak are prey to the strong. Since you can't keep up with the times, you can only bid farewell to this world, royal family of Luke. Living a comfortable life would only cause creatures to stop evolving and lose the will to forge ahead. Dressrosa was like that now. They were completely going with the flow. Living a stable life, they were seizing every moment. It was no wonder that they were ruthlessly crushed by Doflamingo. Every man for himself. Dustless would only show his benevolent heart to his own people. As for others, he would see if they had any value. Beep, beep, beep. The blue din mushy on the left side of the map rang, and Doflamingo's voice sounded. Surprisingly, there was no joy in his voice. Instead, there was dissatisfaction. Did Sengoku go back on his word? Dustless sat down casually and asked calmly. On the other side, Doflamingo was startled, then shook his head and said to Dustless's din mushy, "That's not it. He has already announced in front of the world. Going back on his word is like shooting himself in the foot. The Marine is righteous. Naturally, it's impossible for them to be like a pirate who doesn't keep his word. If they speak out, they will be hated by the whole world. The prestige of the Marine will be greatly reduced. I sent someone to inform Dressrosa to hand over the throne of the Don Quixote family. That old brat refused my offer," Doflamingo said angrily. "A mere ant dared to refuse his offer. This is tantamount to slapping his face. The throne of the royal family originally belonged to the Don Quixote family. Taking back the former throne, this is the most normal thing in Doflamingo's view. This is normal. If it was me, it would be impossible to hand over the throne. The people of the royal family are still very popular. Even if you forcibly take away his throne, the local people will not recognize your existence." Dustless explained lightly. The interest in his heart was swept away. He thought that Doflamingo was talking about an interesting topic. He didn't expect the content to be so boring. Indeed, Doflamingo nodded in agreement. It's easy to kill an ant. The key is to make the people accept him as the new king. Although he can't wait to eliminate the group of ants, Doflamingo still needs these people to create the illusion of peace and prosperity to confuse the world. Only in this way can he cover up some shady things in the dark. Even a wise man will make a mistake. Dustless sighed in his heart. He didn't expect Doflamingo to make such a big mistake. This is obviously the strength of this kid. If there are no conditions, you can create conditions. Wu Qin's eyes glowed with a ruthless light. He was not a soft-hearted person. He said in a cold voice, "Use your fruit's ability to temporarily control King Luke to slaughter the islanders. Of course, that includes the soldiers he leads. At that time, you can save them as a savior and wash away the image of a butcher. This is just my idea. It's up to you whether to use it or not." After that, without waiting for Doflamingo to answer, Wu Chan simply hung up the din mushy, and his eyes once again fell on the huge, long, and narrow map, and his eyes sometimes showed a strange look. On the other side of the din mushy, Doflamingo was stunned. He didn't expect Dustless to be so ruthless. But after thinking about it, he thought that this is indeed a feasible plan and the most effective and direct. A group of ants is dead. Anyway, the number of towns destroyed by Doflamingo can be counted on 2 hands. One more island is not a big deal. Chapter 574. Doflamingo's choice has nothing to do with Dustless. The former is more anxious than him, and human life is equivalent to grass for a pirate like Doflamingo who kills people like flax. According to Dustless's speculation, Doflamingo can't wait to implement this ruthless plan, which is comparable to his ambition to swallow the sky and devour the earth. The death of a few human lives is insignificant. It's just a small matter. Dustless is still interested in setting his future plans. If he wants to get a share of the pie in the future world, he must have a perfect plan for rainy days. The opportunity will not come again, and it is often left to those who are prepared in advance. Dustless's plan is also quite simple: suppress the enemy and strengthen himself. Both the Akagami, red hair, pirates and the Kaido pirates have been weakened by him in various ways. Compared with the miserable Akagami, red hair, pirates who were almost killed, the Kaido pirates are much stronger. Although they were also extremely tragic by Dustless, they are much better than Akagami, red hair, Shanks who withdrew from the New World. Next is the Bigaman pirates and the Whitebeard pirates. The world is so big that the four seas are still okay. In the second half of the New World, most of it is occupied by the Yonko for emperors. If you want to grab food from the tiger's mouth, you can only pull the teeth from the tiger's mouth. However, this is tantamount to self-destruction for most pirates. The power of the Yonko for emperors is beyond imagination. Dustless, Sama, what you want is here. White Zetsu emerged from the ground, holding a delicate iron box in his hands, quietly buckling the lid and baking it with an extremely strong iron lock, looking quite mysterious. In order to provoke the Whitebeard pirates and the Bigaman pirates, Dustless spent a lot of money. Isn't it a pity to give this thing to that old, which by Gumamu? No matter what, it's still the strongest and most evil dark fruit of the Logia. The dark fruit in this iron box is Logia's dark fruit, known as the most evil fruit in history. Its ability is terrible, and it can form a black hole like gravity that swallows everything. How could White Zetsu be willing to give away such a powerful devil fruit to Bigamam, that old witch? It took him nearly a year to find this devil fruit with countless doppelgangers. Bigamam, that old witch, is ashamed. Why don't you give it to Miss? I think it will be of great use to her. Staring at Dustless, White Zetsu suggested tentatively. The matter of giving birth to a daughter was said by Dustless himself. There was a flash of hesitation in his eyes, and then he shook his head decisively. This plan is not feasible. It's still too early for that little girl to use the devil fruit. Let her waste it. Moon's twos. What's more, if he secretly fed the dark fruit to Yushi, Dustless would guarantee that Kagaya would hunt him down all over the world. Secondly, using the devil fruit was equivalent to having an additional weakness. He would become a non-swimmer and unable to step into the sea. And this weakness is well known to the world. At first, Dustless also had the idea of dark fruit, but he had the system's bugged existence and didn't care about the gains and losses of a devil fruit. But giving the dark fruit to the Bigaman pirates will cause the power of their pirates to expand rapidly. White Zetsu murmured. He has also heard of the dark fruit's heaven-defyings. It is far more heaven-defying than ordinary Logia's ability. It doesn't matter, as long as you can provoke Bigamam and Whitebeard to fight, a devil fruit is insignificant. Dustless said quite casually, White Zetsu's problem is not a problem. Even if the dark fruit is eaten, it is not a big problem, as long as the other party is killed. At that time, the dark fruit will reappear again. With White Zetsu's huge clone, it is only a matter of time to find it. Whitebeard is very cunning. That guy should not rashly fight with Bigamam for a devil fruit. White Zetsu said with a little doubt. Even if the Yonko, for emperors, have grievances, they will maintain great restraint. Once the fight starts, the Marines who are watching the fire from the other side of the river and other ambitious pirates who covet the position of Yonko for emperors. Ants can bite an elephant to death, and the power of countless ants can also collapse a river dam. It is not difficult to tear apart the tired Yonko for emperors. Whitebeard will not be his opponent, but Blackbeard is anxiously waiting. Dustless smiled calmly when he heard this. Whitebeard will not do it, but Blackbeard, a man with ambition who can swallow the four seas, will not give up. His purpose of hiding the Whitebeard pirates for so many years is to get this most evil fruit in history. If the two overlords don't do anything, their pirates will fight. At that time, they will naturally jump from behind the scenes to the front. Dustless is the master of protecting his children, and Bigamam also can't rub sand in his eyes. The two of them are naturally dry wood and fire. They don't need Dustless to fan the flames to fight. Reluctantly handing the dark fruit to Dustless, White Zetsu also understands that he can't catch the wolf without sacrificing the child. If he wants to hook a scheming man like Blackbeard, only the dark fruit can attract his appetite. Today, Blackbeard is also extremely powerful. The 3 scars on red hair Shank's eyes were his masterpiece, and he himself had a few teeth knocked out. No matter what, it's still mine in the end. With a blazing heat in his hand, Dustless easily melted the iron box, revealing a strange purple fruit full of patterns. The surface gives people a feeling of extreme evil. A coldness that pierces the depths of the soul spreads from it. When the host of the fruit was killed, the ability would not disappear. Instead, it would appear in a different form. From the beginning to the end, this devil fruit would not escape the control of Dustless. Even if it was eaten by Whitebeard in the future, he could just kill him. After accidentally discovering the devil fruit, the first thing these loyal subordinates of Bigamam thought of was not to tell Bigamam about the boss. Instead, several crew members with evil intentions silenced their companions. He intended to take the devil fruit for himself. It is reasonable to have evil intentions. The devil fruit illustration handbook recorded that this dark fruit is the evilest fruit in history. How can such an introduction be an ordinary thing? This sudden change was also beyond Dustless's expectations. Although this was the case, it was also what he wanted. Because of this, it was more confirmed that this was the dark fruit, so that some people with ulterior motives would think that this was hearsay. Because of the uneven distribution of the loot, it caused the crew to kill each other. This kind of thing happened everywhere. The episode of killing between the crew added a lot of suspense. The devil fruit that can cause the crew of the Yonko, for emperors, to kill each other must not be ordinary. This also confirmed the identity of the dark fruit. Secretly, Dustless used the huge privileges of the Tenryubito to add fuel to the fire. In just less than a day, this news that should have been limited to the Bigamam pirates swept across the New World like a hurricane. Enough to destroy the New World, the strongest dark fruit in the world appeared in the Bigamam pirates, and it was accompanied by several undeniable photos. Such shocking news appeared in newspapers all over the world the next day, and it became known to the world at an incredible speed. Among them, the most shocked was Bigamam, one of the Yonko, for emperors. To be honest, it was just a devil fruit. Although it was powerful beyond imagination, Bigamam didn't care much because she was already an ability user and the devil fruit was useless. What made it most difficult for her to accept was that the people who killed the crew were the few people she trusted the most, and they secretly did such a dirty thing behind her back. It was unforgivable. Those who tried to take the dark fruit were melted by her inhumane use of gastric juice. Bigamam also knew the temptation of the dark fruit. It was definitely not worse than Whitebeard's tremor fruit, Gura no Mi. However, the name of the Bigamam pirates was enough to stop those pirates. Although there were some who came to ask for the dark fruit, it was best to be mercilessly dismembered. Bastard of all people, why did you have to go to that old hag? The night sky was particularly quiet, and the tall Blackbeard roared angrily. His eyes were fixed on the devil fruit on the screen. He could be 100% sure that this was the legendary dark fruit. Thinking of Baigum Mamu's terrifying strength, Blackbeard broke out in a cold sweat. His heart was filled with fear. Unlike the heroic great pirates, Blackbeard had a huge disadvantage, or it could be said that his character was flawed. Whether it was 100 Beast Kaido, red-haired Shanks, or Whitebeard, they all turned a deaf ear to life in the battle and held the mentality of fighting with their lives. Only Blackbeard was afraid of death. Of course, this is also human nature. It shows that compared to other pirates, Blackbeard is more cunning and realistic. He considers his life in everything. If his life is gone, what's the use of getting the dark fruit? The cautious Blackbeard naturally wouldn't be an idiot to fight Bigamam alone. Chapter 576. Inside Mariehua's villa, White Zetsu performs his daily fixed duties and informs Dustless of all the important information collected, and Dustless uses the unparalleled power of Tenryubito to spread the news of the dark fruit, and the whole world is shrouded in a giant vortex. The bottomless, invisible vortex is spreading, attracting the eyes of the major forces. Although the ability of the fruit varies from person to person, if you find a good seedling and cultivate it a little and give it to them, it will be a powerful battle power in the future, and it can even reach the level of an admiral. It is self-evident what it means for a pirate group to have a super battle power comparable to an admiral. Big Mom is also a smart person. These days, he is looking for the right candidate, but he suddenly realized that there seems to be no such person in his huge pirate group. How many people are worthy of trust if the person she once trusted can steal the dark fruit without her knowing? Maybe many people have already planned how to take the head of her captain. There were as many talented people as there were carps crossing the river. Whether or not they were completely loyal was a big question mark. Such a serious question had to be handled carefully. Otherwise, if they nurtured an ingrate, the gains would not make up for the losses. Blackbeard has been staying in the Whitebeard pirates with peace of mind, and there is no big movement. White Zetsu whispered, and he couldn't help but look at Blackbeard. Blackbeard is much calmer than he imagined, and he can maintain a clear mind in the face of fatal temptation. Blackbeard knows that the more urgent the matter is, the more important it is to have a calm heart. So he is currently as calm as a stone, but silently chooses to observe the movement. Bai Mu was not a gentle sheep. Anyone who dared to touch a tiger's but would end up being torn into pieces. Don't underestimate Blackbeard. There will always be a time when a wild beast shows its fangs. His ambition is not to settle things peacefully. He is only waiting for the perfect opportunity to deliver a fatal blow. Dustless said softly. His indifferent tone was filled with certainty. The value of the dark fruit is equivalent to Blackbeard's second life. How can he give up his second life if he is afraid of death? The most cunning creatures in the world are humans, and the most treacherous among humans are those who have abandoned their dignity. Dustless said calmly. His words flowed like a river and were filled with absolute wisdom. To them, victory, defeat, glory, and personal dignity can all be laughed away, and Blackbeard is precisely such a person. Needless to say, Blackbeard did not care about personal glory. To him, fame and fortune were just fleeting clouds. He was powerful and had once seriously injured Red Hair. The 3 scars on Red Hair's eyes were all thanks to Blackbeard. Even so, he was content to be a small soldier under Whitebeard, abandoning his dignity and glory to be an ordinary crew member, abandoning the fame and fortune that pirates value the most, and living in obscurity for decades. In addition, Blackbeard was extremely greedy for life and afraid of death. Every time he schemed, he would bear the brunt of it. What he valued the most was his own life. Compared to those who risked their lives for another and viewed life as a feather, Blackbeard was far inferior. This was his bad habit, but it was also Blackbeard's biggest advantage. It was because he was greedy for life and afraid of death that he was able to display what he had learned and plan all his plans to the point that they were flawless. This was the only way to ensure the safety of his little life. That is to say, Blackbeard is waiting for the best moment. White Zetsu said. Dustless heard the words and nodded slightly. The probability of Blackbeard making a move is 0 if he is not 100% sure. What is 100% absolute certainty? At least he can save his own life. Otherwise, it would be useless to get the dark fruit. Then again, staring at White Zetsu, Dustless suddenly turned around. After a little thought, he asked directly, "What is the recent movement of Doflamingo?" Although the current main plan is to stir up trouble with Big As Mom and Whitebeard, the trace of the clown Doflamingo is also very important. Dustless also needs his Dressrosa to build Pluton. This, White Zetsu's face changed slightly, and he was suddenly speechless. He looked at Dustless with a little timidity. Witnessing the cold, emotionless, machine-like Dustless, his scalp couldn't help but tingle. Doflamingo used Birdcage on Dressrosa. The outside world has no way to know the specifics, but according to the raging flames in the town and the scene of blood flowing like a river, at this point, White Zetsu's tone stopped. The meaning behind it was self-evident. Dressrosa was now like a second world isolated from the rest of the world. As for the specifics, only the initiator, Doflamingo, and the heavens knew. In short, there is no need to think about it. Dressrosa is definitely bleeding like a river now. That kid, his strength is average, but he has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. After a moment of silence, Dustless said with ridicule and disdain. According to Dustless's speculation and his strange movements a while ago, it is estimated that Doflamingo is preparing for the artificial devil fruit in advance. Early the next morning, the sky in the distance turned white, the sun rose high, and the fiery red morning sun dotted the whole world. The warm feeling made people lazy and couldn't help but want to go back to sleep. On the ship, Blackbeard did not sleep for the entire night. Even so, he was still full of energy. His eyes were shining with awe-inspiring luster. There was an indescribable sense of confidence and ruthlessness between his eyebrows. It was the complete opposite of his usual introverted aura. Blackbeard narrowed his eyes. He was as cunning as a rat. The gaze that shot out from the slits of his eyes was exceptionally vicious. It was as if he was choosing to devour someone. His cold lips were raised high. Even though he concealed his smile very well, one could still see the curve of his lips. After a night, he had already thought of countermeasures to deal with it. It is definitely not possible to fight alone. He can only fool the Whitebeard pirates to fight together. Whitebeard is very rational and smart, but it does not mean that the IQ of his crew is unfathomable. Chapter 577. Ha! Blackbeard's face was full of fanaticism, and his longing eyes had already seen the scene of him stepping on Whitebeard's body to become the supreme hegemon. Gritting his teeth, he was filled with boundless hope for the future. After enduring patiently for several decades, he might be able to prove his Tao and become a god in a few days. From then on, he would step onto the path of light. Why are you laughing so early in the morning, idiot Titch? My dream of becoming the Pirate King was ruined by you, Titch. Don't mind him. He always has this kind of silly moment. The awakened Whitebeard pirates complained with dissatisfaction, their eyes full of grief, but even so, they only protested verbally, and this scene was not surprising. Everyone thinks that Titch is a trustworthy person. Subconsciously, they have regarded him as a brother. I'm sorry. You know, I'm extremely optimistic. Sometimes my body can't help but vent its excitement. Scratching his head awkwardly, Blackbeard put on an honest look. Although it looked neither fish nor fowl, no one doubted him. The Whitebeard pirates were also speechless. They all thought that Blackbeard was showing his true feelings. A group of idiots. On the surface, he was smiling, but in his heart, he was cursing the group of idiots in front of him. After following Whitebeard for a long time, they had also developed a heroic spirit. Their hearts were as broad as the vast sea. However, for a cunning pirate, this is not a good sign. If you want to survive in this chaotic world, you can't be careless with anyone. Even your companions are no exception. No one knows what's in the other's mind, so it's better to be careful. Regardless of this group of people, he looked at the person washing on the bow deck. It was Thatch, the captain of the 4th Division, and he was also a good friend of Blackbeard. Of course, he has a good relationship with Thatch. This is the reason why Blackbeard deliberately pulled him into the relationship. Thatch is approachable, and he is much more naive than the suspicious Captain Mark and the Diamond Jozu. It also shows that he is much easier to deceive. Pull him into the water, Whitebeard can't ignore it. It's better to let Thatch get hurt. This will inevitably arouse Whitebeard's anger, and he will desperately fight with Big as Mom. Blackbeard was very proud. After observing Whitebeard for nearly 10 years, he had figured out Whitebeard and the temperament of this group of crew members. What drew these crew members from all over the world and with different skin colors together was Whitebeard's broad mind and the sincere feelings between them. Once the crew members are bullied and wronged, the entire Whitebeard pirates will attack them. Captain Thatch, it's not good. My father is in danger. Realizing that there was no one around, Blackbeard squeezed out tears from the corners of his eyes and ran to Surd's side. His bitter and pained face was 10 times uglier than the death of his father. "What do you mean?" Being suddenly asked by Blackbeard, Thatch's face was full of confusion. Obviously, he didn't realize what Blackbeard meant. He just puzzled. "Although my father's body is getting worse year by year, he can live for another 10 or 20 years without any problem. Whitebeard's physique is extraordinary, and he is beyond normal human beings. After becoming one of the Yonko for emperors, the number of people who dare to provoke Whitebeard has gradually decreased. Recently, Whitebeard has rarely made a move and had a lot of time to rest. You are talking about a natural situation without the interference of external factors. But for example," with a sly smile in his eyes, Blackbeard raised his voice and said, "The world has not been calm recently. No one dares to provoke the Whitebeard pirates because of my father's name. But as you said, my father's body is getting worse year by year. One day, he will be dragged down. At that time, other pirates will dismember us." Blackbeard pretended to be anxious and worried, looking like he was worried about the country and the people. This scared Surd into a daze. "This is indeed a major problem, but there is no need to worry about it." Thatch obviously heard the meaning of alarmism, but he didn't doubt Blackbeard. The idea of the Whitebeard pirates' crew being a family has been deeply ingrained in his mind. It is impossible for him to doubt his brother. He didn't expect Blackbeard to be more insidious in his calculations. That is also a matter of more than 10 years later. There is no need to worry about it now. By then, we will be able to support one side of the sky. Thatch said confidently as the haze was swept away. "You are such a half-baked person. There will be no stage for a vassal like you in the future." His heart was full of contempt and disdain. He sneered at Thatch's confidence. But on the surface, he was very heavy. That was before. Now the situation has changed. After a pause, Blackbeard said, "The appearance of the dark fruit is bound to increase the strength of the Bigaman pirates in a short period of time. Maybe soon, there will be one more powerful battle power. You know what it means. Although we have no direct conflict with the Bigaman pirates, no one will care about their territory." Thatch's expression solidified, and he nodded thoughtfully. "This is indeed a big problem. The sudden appearance of the dark fruit will increase the strength of the Bigaman pirates. Although there is no direct conflict, the Yonko for emperors are all potential competitors, which is known to all. I've had enough of the fish." Looking at Thatch vaguely, Blackbeard smiled. It was not difficult to see from his expression that Thatch's heart was shaken. When he was about to add fuel to the fire, his back suddenly felt cold. Strange. He turned his head around strangely, his eyes emitting a dim light. Combined with his rough and ferocious face, he looked particularly frightening. His eyes stared at the dense forest on the island. He suddenly felt a pair of eyes spying on him. Chapter 578. Blackbeard's brows furrowed tightly together. Even though it was just his intuition, he was a suspicious person by nature. The sudden appearance of this strange feeling made him extremely uncomfortable. It was extremely difficult for him to ignore it and pretend that nothing had happened. "Maybe it's really my illusion." His observation hockey spread, and after a careful perception, he noticed that there was no one around. It was dead silent. Only occasionally, there were a few solitary birds passing by. Blackbeard's suspicious heart was quiet. He turned his head and continued to talk to Surd about the perfect plan to save his father from the fire and water. "Is that man Blackbeard? I thought that dustless Sama was exaggerating about him. I didn't expect this guy to be so unfathomable. His strength is different from what he showed on the surface." White Zetsu in the depths of the ground was stunned. About half an hour later, he realized that Blackbeard's ship had left. He came out of the ground and sucked in the fresh air of the outside world, trying to calm himself down. White Zetsu's heart was pounding wildly. Once Blackbeard locked onto him, White Zetsu was 100% sure that he would be killed or killed. Blackbeard was not a good person. But it seems that dustless Sama's strategy seems to have succeeded. Staring at the battleship in the distance, Baiju raised his eyebrows and sneered. The master who created him was Wu Chun. He understood Wu Chen's means better than ordinary people. Being unable to live or die was just the beginning. Each person who looked down on Dustless all had abnormally miserable endings. No, this idea is really idiotic. How could this group of clowns who were casually played with know that the person behind the scenes was Dustless Sama? White Zetsu smiled bitterly at himself. The world regarded this as an accidental accident. Sending out the strongest fruit with the title of history's evilest, the dark fruit, calmly as bait. There is no such person who can have such a temperament. To some extent, this possibility does not exist. There is no absolute in the world, no perfect plan. Any plan designed by people always has unknown flaws. If it is eaten by others, the loss is not worth the gain. In fact, Dustless was willing to give away the dark fruit. He was able to let it go and never cared about the gains and losses of the devil fruit. Even if he was eaten, it wouldn't change anything. Time flew by. Unknowingly, several days had passed. Time was precious when you cared about it, but when you ignored it, it became worthless. He completely ignored the concept of time, and everything passed extremely quickly. War is cruel and ever-changing. The Big Man pirates got the news of the dark fruit. Due to Dustless's reclusion behind the scenes, at first, it was just pirates from the New World. As time passed, some pirates from the Four Seas also heard the news. Big Man is terrible, but there are some evil people who are not afraid of death, and then they provoke the Big Man pirates 3 times in a row, trying to get the favor of the goddess of luck. Of course, they still receive the grim smile of the Grim Reaper in the end. This group of people is the main force of this battle. In the Dark Eye Cellar, there were coffins placed neatly, which was used by Dustless to store the corpses, including the corpses of the previous Hokage. They were responsible for the main combat mission this time. Summoning Jutsu, Edo Tensei. As Dustless shouted, the unmoving coffin on the ground suddenly lifted up. Then, the entire surface of the coffin burst open, revealing a few familiar cold faces. Then, after a few seconds, they all opened their eyes. Whiz, whiz, whiz. Several sharp sounds broke through the air in succession. In the darkness where you couldn't see your own fingers, you could vaguely see a few hazy black shadows pouncing on Wu Chun from all directions. Their hands were shining with cold light, and they were obviously holding sharp weapons. As expected, keeping your consciousness was the wrong choice. Although a pure killing machine is cruel, it is very suitable for old antiques like you. His left eye suddenly turned into Rinnegan, and the calm corner of his clothes was blown up, followed by an invisible repulsive force that was unstoppable. Shinra Tensei. Bang, bang, bang. Several shadows were forced back in the blink of an eye, and their bodies were ruthlessly scattered. Their faces came into view. They were the previous Hokage, led by Hashirama. Even with the immortal body, it is easy to kill you. You don't want to die again. Dustless's eyes were as calm as stagnant water, and he looked indifferently at the people who were knocked down. His emotionless expression and cold voice coincided with the cold killing machine. Humph. Have you ever seen a Hokage compromise with the enemy? Uchiha Dustless. An old but full of energy roared. It was the Sandaime Hokage who was glaring at them. The other Hokages were silent. Their eyes were cold as they stared at Wuchen, silently expressing their position. In that case, I can only deprive you of your consciousness. Although your combat power will decrease, it doesn't matter. The immortal body is enough to make up for the decrease in strength. With a strange smile, the originally expressive faces of the Hokage instantly became pale and indifferent, and their eyes were replaced by emptiness. In an instant, Dustless brutally deprived them of their consciousness. Originally, for the sake of Tsunade's face, I could reluctantly let you go once and keep your own consciousness. You don't know what's good for you, so you can only blame yourself for this. Dustless glanced at them indifferently. These so-called Hokage are still stubborn, and now things have changed, and time and space have changed, and the deep-rooted ideas in their hearts seem to be affecting their reason. There was no market for the will of fire in the past. Now, in this world, there was similarly no market. But to Dustless, these few super powerhouses were all divine weapons used to kill in the dark. It doesn't matter if their strength decreases, the immortal body is enough to make up for the deficiency. In this world, no one knows the truth-seeking ball. Chapter 579. Pursing his lips, Wu Chun was disdainful of these old fogies in front of him. They were always talking about unity and guarding the future, but they have always been singing a one-man show. In the past, no one cared about them. The situation in this world is more complicated and changeable. Their saintly mentality will only make them a laughingstock. Ninjas are very ugly, but they are slightly inferior to pirates. Pirates have no morality. 1 second, they can call each other brothers, and the next second, they can fight against each other. Time passed quickly, and 7 days passed in a blink of an eye. Because of Dustless's interference, the whole world was full of gunpowder, so almost all the pirates stared at the movements of the Bigamamu pirates and became the target of public criticism in an instant. During this period, it is worth mentioning that Thatch, the captain of the 4th Division under Whitebeard, came to secretly steal the dark fruit. He was easily defeated by Bigamamu and tore off an arm of the other party. Even Blackbeard was beaten to a pulp. Whitebeard knew that he went berserk on the spot and led the entire Whitebeard pirates to invade. He fought with the Bigamamu pirates for a day and gained the upper hand. Now Whitebeard is only in his 60s. Although his body has begun to decline, he is still in the golden age of his peak and can be said to be invincible. As one of the Yonko, for emperors, Bigamamu is obviously inferior to Whitebeard. Using the powerful ability of Tremor Fruit, Gura no Mi, and showing the power to destroy the world, he easily destroyed the island where Bigamamu was entrenched and temporarily repelled the Bigamamu pirates. Damn, someone must have plotted against me. Damn dark fruit. Countless blood vessels spread in her eyes, and Bigamamu roared angrily, venting her inner depression and indignation. Looking at her, her body was not inferior to the giant clan. Her body was covered with blood, and even some parts had traces of depression. These were all thanks to Whitebeard. This is too strange. It must be some bastard who plotted against me. If I don't break your bones and scatter your ashes, I can't vent the hatred in my heart. Bigamamu gasped and roared in a low voice, no different from a hysterical beast. At first, Big Mama didn't think much of it, but later, as more and more pirates challenged her, she suddenly realized that something was wrong. The Bigaman pirates are powerful enough to destroy the world, but if they are targeted by the whole world, they will die. It is obvious that someone is plotting against her, and she has become the target of the whole world. Bang! He angrily threw the metal box containing the dark fruit away, and a dent was formed on the deck of the battleship. As if he was still angry, he stomped on it a few times. Bigamamu's heart felt stifled. If it weren't for the fact that there were so many people around, she would have given herself a slap. Her whole body was trembling with anger, and her eyes were about to pop out. This was not the strongest devil fruit that could increase the fleet's strength, but a well-deserved death curse. It won't take long for the Bigaman pirates to be wiped out by the whole world. Boom, boom, boom. The dizzying roar suddenly came, and the surrounding sea shook violently. Bigamamu, who was caught off guard, was splashed with water stains all over her body. The cold sea water was biting and cold. Instead of extinguishing the fire in Bigamamu's heart, the fire became bigger and bigger, burning her reason. Marine? A group of shameless villains, still as despicable as ever. There's a bottom line for looking down on people. Yonko for emperors is Yonko for emperors, unless the two old things Garp and Sengoku come in person. Bigamamu sneered again and again, and the two characters, Garp and Sengoku, came to her and gave her a headache. After all, both of them had fought with Roger, and their strength was almost deified. In fact, Bigamamu was not afraid of Garp and Sengoku, but that was before. She had fought with Whitebeard for nearly a day and suffered a lot of injuries. She had no energy to deal with peerless powerhouses like Sengoku and Garp. If other people come, they will die. Even if an admiral comes, Baigumon Mu will dare to fight. Not to mention that Marine Admiral is in a miserable state. Mom, the Marine is here. A group of embarrassed younger brothers ran over and attached themselves to Baigumon Mu, tired of dealing with them. Their expressions were decadent, and their exhausted appearance was obviously mentally and physically exhausted. These days, they have fought against many opponents, and their energy has long been squandered. Baigumon Mu's eyes narrowed, and the expressions of these people were all in her eyes. On the surface, she was unmoved, but in fact, she was secretly worried. Once the people's hearts were scattered, her pirates were about to come to an end. It seems that it is necessary to win a battle to restore confidence. Staring at the marine fleet in the distance, Baigumon Mu intended to kill the chicken to warn the monkey. When she was about to send the pirates over, a sentence from her subordinates abruptly broke her dream. Garp, that old thing, personally led the team, followed by a young man. According to the outline, it is very similar to the honorary admiral in the Marine newspaper last time. The merciless words made Baigumon Mu's face red and her neck thick. She held back her words for a long time and took them back. An admiral in Garp. I am afraid that it is likely to be her. After days of hard fighting, it is not suitable to fight again. Quickly retreat. Baigumon Mu showed an expression of sympathy for her subordinates, but her expression was extremely ugly, and she was more sad than eating 10 pounds of flies. The crew didn't talk nonsense when they heard this, and they drove the ships at full power to avoid the Marines shelling. The energy of people has a limit, and they have reached the bottleneck. How could it be that kid? With the excellent vision of the telescope, Baigu's mom saw Wu Chun standing side by side with Garp at a glance. She immediately widened her eyes and said incredulously. At the same time, she didn't forget to reprimand her subordinates. Increase the speed of navigation. Who dares to slack off? I will throw him into the sea to fill the stomach of the Sea King. Baigumon Mu's old face twitched, and she cursed her bad luck. Dustless's strength was enough to fight the Yonko for emperors, and even suppress the strength of the Yonko for emperors. Once such a person joins forces with Garp, I am afraid that in the future, there will be a big pirate named Baigumon Mu. P.S. Baigumon Mu's men did call her mother, which sounds disgusting, but the truth. Chapter 580. Boom, boom, boom. Monstrous waves were set off around the fleet, and the sea water of more than 10 meters almost swallowed the Baigumon Mu pirates. The sea water had wet Baigumon Mu's bulky coat. Nevertheless, her forehead was sweating uncontrollably. For the first time in her life, she showed a fearful expression. Now she was already bruised, and Garp was enough for her to drink a pot. If Dustless was added, thinking about it, Baigumon Mu couldn't help but feel a chill, and her body uncontrollably retreated. Big bandits like Bigga's mom were not afraid of death. But if the enemy was an invincible existence, then they would be an idiot to recklessly face it head-on. Of the 36 stratagems, escape is the best stratagem, which is vividly reflected in the hands of pirates. Although her teeth were itching with anger, Baigumon Mu had to admit that going against the current would only lead to her own destruction, and she had to escape. This is the way to survive. Where there is life, there is hope. Let's wait and see. Through the sight of the telescope, she glanced fiercely at the Marines, and with the most vicious language in her life, she did not hesitate to curse the attacking Marines. Well, what's with that guy's eyes? Her eyes suddenly fell on Dustless, and Baigumon Mu was surprised. Dustless seemed to be aware of Baigumon Mu's spying, and he raised the corners of his mouth. With a bright smile, he looked quite approachable, and his smile was like a warm spring breeze in March, which was refreshing. However, Baigumon Mu's eyes were full of different meanings. Contempt, ridicule. In short, Baigumon Mu's eyes were laughing at her powerlessness. Dustless's light and elegant smile was the embodiment of her powerlessness. It was precisely because she couldn't threaten Wu Chun with her strength that the latter had such a relaxed expression. He was quietly contemptuous and didn't need any words to modify it. The calmer Dustless was, the more it was an insult to Big-a-Ma-Moo, a naked contempt. In the dark, Big-a-Ma-Moo saw Dustless's unscrupulous ridicule, and her eyes were about to burst. "Mom," the crew members looked at Baigu-Ma-Moo in fear. In a trance, they even saw the miserable appearance of Baigu-Ma-Moo and subconsciously took a step back. Big-a-Man Pirates, Captain Charlotte Lingling, bounty of one of the Yonko for emperors in the second half of the New World. The crew called her mother when she was young. Dustless looked at the information about Bigga's mom in his hand. It was all sent by the Navy. It was just simple basic information. For Dustless, as an honorary admiral, it was just a small matter. Dustless had a strange expression on his face when he saw the word mother. It seems like you have the same idea as this old man. Seeing Dustless's strange expression, Garp's face was full of wretchedness, and his strange laughter made people speechless and tangled. He patted Dustless's shoulder quite familiarly, and then leaned close to Dustless's ear. When he looked around and no one was around, Garp's face changed into a gossipy expression. Whitebeard's crew called him father, and Big-a-Ma-Moo's crew called him mother. Both of them belonged to the giant clan, and they're also one of the Yonko for emperors. Do you think they hooked up with each other when they were young? Otherwise, how could it be so coincidental? Garp asked with a smirk on his face. Occasionally, his eyes would sparkle in agreement. Isn't there a saying that goes, if you are fated to meet each other, even if you are 1,000 miles away, they must have something going on between them. They are a perfect match. Dustless's forehead was filled with countless black lines, and the corner of his mouth was twitching. He stared at Garp with both anger and amusement. He wanted to refute, but he couldn't refute it. Although he knew that this was Garp's nonsense, it was indeed a coincidence that made people speechless. That old man might still be. Seeing that Garp was still talking nonsense, Dustless simply turned around and left. The navy cloak behind him was also bulging. He was quite uncomfortable with this outfit. Although uncomfortable, he still chose to do as the Romans do. He always felt that in the name of justice, doing shady business was more suitable for him. Where is the next sailing route? Bigga's mom is already a drowning dog. Dustless stopped and looked straight at Garp. He was an honorary admiral and had no power. Of course, he was too lazy to take care of it. Everything fell on Garp's head. There is no need to pursue Yonko for emperors. The desperate beast is more ferocious than usual. If you can defeat her, you can just take back the islands occupied by her. Garp said in a depressed whisper, looking at the back of Bigga's mom. He clenched his fists. Even if he was unwilling, he couldn't help it. A skinny camel is bigger than a horse. What's more, there are Whitebeard pirates around. If they suddenly burst out and take a bite, the consequences would be unimaginable. Especially after the previous fight with the Whitebeard pirates, the Bigga's mom pirates were greatly damaged. At least in the next few years, she won't be able to make waves again. Do as you wish. Glancing faintly, Dustless knew that there was a deeper meaning. In addition, there is also the biggest factor. After destroying a Yonko for emperors, not only will there be no benefits, but bad things will come out one after another. The islands ruled by Bigga's mom will first suffer, and pirates will begin to fight for territory and kill each other. The balance of the three major forces will also be broken, and the whole world will fall into a state of rage and loss of control. This old man said a lot. It's estimated that he doesn't have the confidence to kill Bigga's mom. This is interesting. Looking at the faintly unwilling Vice Admiral Garp, Dustless smiled, and at the same time, he was a little curious about Bigga's mom. There is no doubt that Yonko for emperors are peerless powerhouses. Although Garp is strong enough, the other party is the elite of the entire Bigga's mom pirates. Maybe Roger, the Pirate King, will be defeated. Chapter 581. The black ink spots in the distance gradually disappeared and disappeared from the sea forever. The encounter with the Big-a-Man pirates was just a small interlude in the middle. On the island once occupied by the Yonko for emperors, the island affiliated with Big-a-Man, countless coffins rose from the ground, and the dead walked out with dull eyes and a smell of decay. These people were given life again, flexibly manipulating their limbs, slaughtering the remaining pirates on the island, and those never-before-seen ninjutsu were overwhelming. Water attribute, fire attribute, earth attribute. All kinds of stunning moves appeared on the stage. Killing and arson in the name of justice is much more interesting than leisurely marijuana, doing nothing all day. With a strange smile on his cheeks, Dustless disappeared in an instant and turned into a golden beam of light, directly locking the pirates in front of him. Light speed kick. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the voice fell, the locked black shadow was hit by the golden light, and the super-large building in the distance disappeared together with it, turning into a pile of rubble. Even the trace of the corpse was not left. At the moment of the explosion, it had been annihilated into nothingness. What kind of ability does this guy have? It's almost the same as Kizaru's fruit. After killing the attacking pirate, Garp's eyes fell on Dustless's calf with photon remnants. The moves and abilities used were almost the same. Even so, Garp didn't doubt that it was the same fruit. It was impossible for this to happen. It was just a division of similar abilities. In the same era, devil fruit with the same ability does not exist. This is known to the world. The whole scene was bloody and violent. There were charred limbs and broken arms everywhere. The ground was burned black by some kind of blazing force, and the screams were endless. Compared with the cold and ruthless Dustless, Garp was a person with a conscience. Those who could be captured alive were all captured alive, and those who dared to resist were just knocked out. On the other hand, Dustless's Kusanagi cloud sword condensed from photons cut iron like mud, and the pirates who were cut were all brutally dismembered. Executioners who commit crimes in the name of justice stop immediately. An enraged voice came from behind, containing a monstrous killing intent that wished to tear Dustless to shreds. One could even hear the ear-piercing sound of teeth grinding due to excessive hatred. The pirates' brains don't seem to be very bright. They might be able to escape if they hide. Jumping out like a clown, do they think they are the saviors of the world? Sensationalism. Without even turning his head, Dustless's mocking voice resounded in the boundless void. Then, he disappeared from where he stood. Damn it, where did you go? The sound of astonishment exploded, and the pupils were full of dullness. The figure in front of them suddenly disappeared like a ghost, and the observation hockey couldn't perceive the location. It was hard not to be surprised. Boom, boom, boom. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back as an unprecedented power fell from the sky. His standing body was instantly crushed by this valiant and unparalleled power. The ground sank like a swamp as he was mercilessly trampled into the ground in an instant. Ka, ka, ka. The corner of his mouth vomited blood uncontrollably, and then he struggled desperately, but the small foot on his back was no different from a mountain weighing dozens of tons. No matter how fierce the resistance was, it couldn't splash a ripple, and no matter how powerful the force was, it couldn't shake the tender calf. Along with his dignity, it was trampled to nothing. His body was like a willow fluttering in the wind. This was the only thing that touched his mind. A strange emotion spread from the bottom of his heart. In an instant, he felt like a tiny grain of sand. No one would care if he died or not. In this way, do you still think you can save the world? Do you realize how fragile and powerless you are? Spitting out an indifferent accent that did not belong to a human, Wu Qin's emotionless gaze was like looking down at a powerless insect. His cold pupils splashed with faint ripples. Has the mastery of armament hockey reached a small achievement? You have some skills. The texture under his feet was no different from falling on steel, and there was an essential difference between it and the flexible back of human beings. Looking closely, Dustless suddenly felt that the struggling side of the face was familiar, and he seemed to have seen it before. Captain Thatch, we're coming to save you. Suddenly, there was a slight tremor on the ground. When he looked up, the scene reflected in his pupils was a dense group of pirates. They were holding all kinds of weapons, and they were charging towards him with a majestic momentum. Dustless's eyes narrowed slightly, and he looked at the dusty face. Perhaps because his left arm was broken, he didn't recognize Thatch's identity for a while. It turned out to be the Whitebeard Pirates' 4th Division captain. Thatch, no wonder you have this confidence. At this moment, Thatch was in a mess. His left arm had been torn, his eyes were full of filth, and even though his face was full of dust, it still couldn't hide his pale face. Since you were here, Marshal D. Titch, nicknamed Blackbeard, may also be on this island. With a cold face, Dustless looked straight at the pirates roaring in front of him. His pupils flashed with a rare pity, and the Kusanagi, sword condensed from photons in his hand, instantly collapsed. Ignorance is fearless. It's used to describe your group. The white, jade-like hand condensed a large number of photons, like a bottomless black hole, frantically swallowing and absorbing the photons around, condensing into a dazzling flash. Yasakani no Magatama. Thousands of golden flashes flashed out, and the gorgeous light played a cruel scene. Dozens of pirates attacked. Their bodies had hundreds of burn holes out of thin air, and they fell to the ground with an unwilling face. Although they were already dead, their gray pupils were full of fear. Unlike Garp, Dustless only pursued 2 policies when dealing with enemies. The first was to completely control them, and the second was to completely destroy them. Chapter 582. Seeing that Dustless's methods were so bloody and cruel, as if the people he slaughtered were just a bunch of insignificant insects, Dustless's dark gem-like eyes remained calm. His whole body was filled with an aura of isolation. Serd couldn't help but feel at a loss. He didn't see the shadow of a human in Dustless. He didn't feel sad or happy about things. His clear eyes only had an unchanging indifference. Witnessing his former companions being brutally beaten into sieves, Serd's hatred for Dustless increased. In the blink of an eye, his whole face and neck turned red. He turned his head and glared at Dustless. His eyes were scarlet, like a dying beast. There was only soul-deep hatred in his eyes. Blackbeard? You mean Titch, right? Sorry to disappoint you. I've already asked him to meet up with my father in advance. Staring at Dustless with a sneer, Serd smiled proudly. He didn't hide the sarcasm in his words. It seemed that only in this way could his devastated heart feel better. Serd was sizing up Wu Chun without leaving a trace. He hoped to see his disappointment, but unfortunately, his wish was destined to fail. His face was always expressionless. He maintained an indifferent look. His frozen expression was indifferent. He was neither happy nor angry. His indifferent look had an invisible contempt for everything. You're the stupidest person in the world. You were betrayed by your own people, but you still helped him count the money and sacrificed your life to protect him. You're so considerate of others. I've lost. Dustless lowered his head and sighed. Serd's face turned pale, and his breathing became heavy. He wanted to see Dustless's painful expression. He didn't want to see Dustless speak to him with such a pitiful look and a sympathetic tone. For a moment, he felt like a clown abandoned by the whole world. Quietly sizing up Serd at his feet, Dustless' tone didn't have any intention of ridicule. There was only pure sympathy. Serd was fooled by Blackbeard to the point of confusion and even protected him to the point of death. Dustless couldn't help but admire Blackbeard's methods. In the future, he was able to stabilize as one of the 4 emperors, obtain the dark fruit, and take away Whitebeard's tremor fruit. Whether it was accidental or inevitable, it proved that Blackbeard was extraordinary. A true wise man did not rely on absolute strength to conquer the world and control the world behind the scenes. Instead, he used his weak strength to make the entire world go round and round. Countless experts were at his fingertips, playing their roles according to the script he had arranged in advance. Only then could he be called a wise man. Blackbeard is such a person. Although his strength is not as good as Bigamamu and Whitebeard for the time being, he can provoke a war between the 2 pirate regiments with his wisdom. The same was true during the War of the Best in later generations. The real winner was not the Marine headquarters that suffered heavy losses, nor the Whitebeard pirates that Whitebeard died, but Blackbeard, who gained both fame and fortune. You still don't understand. You're just a clown being played by Blackbeard. All of this is a drama directed and written by him. His goal is to provoke a war between Whitebeard and Bigu's mom, and take the opportunity to seize the dark fruit. Dustless' magnetic voice was full of wisdom as he said faintly, "The onlooker sees everything clearly." It was precisely because he was not involved that he could take a more rational approach and pry into the secrets behind the scenes. "Nonsense, Titch is easygoing. He can't be the kind of person you said. He has been the Whitebeard pirates for more than 10 years. Don't tell me his purpose is the so-called dark fruit." Surd screamed hysterically, denying everything Dustless said. "Why deceive yourself? If Blackbeard didn't instigate you to secretly steal the dark fruit, none of this would have happened." Dustless explained softly. There was only simple pity and sympathy in his tone. He sympathized with Surd's ignorance and ridiculous ideas, his narrow vision, and his ignorance of people's hearts. The most ridiculous thing is that Surd still defended Blackbeard even after being cheated by him. This kind of tragic character also made Dustless's dusty heart loosen. He wanted to ridicule Surd, but he couldn't. In short, Dustless lost to such a strange character. Dustless's ridicule is at least a person like Whitebeard. Surd is not qualified. "You can go." Dustless glanced at him faintly, and his eyes flashed with a strange light. The golden calf that stepped on Surd's body was also taken back, leaving Surd with a stunned face. "Bastard, I don't even have the qualifications to be killed by you, right?" Standing up and glaring at Dustless, Surd roared furiously. The burning flames burned his reason. If he didn't realize the huge gap between them, he would definitely kill Dustless at all costs. However, even if he fought with his life, he still couldn't shake Wu Chun. Wu Chun was so close, yet it was like the ends of the earth. His hand simply couldn't touch Wu Chun, and it was also impossible to touch his shadow. "Do you think you're qualified?" Dustless turned his head, revealing half of his face, and asked. She breathed out cold air and glanced at him expressionlessly. Her cold eyes were as quiet as stagnant water at the bottom of a beach. She glanced at him deeply and then strolled away. Her leisurely pace was like a stroll after dinner. About half an hour later, Dustless came to the marine battleship. "You are cruel enough. He has been driven crazy by you. You killed him with your own hands. You let him go on purpose," Garp said helplessly as he leaned against the marine battleship on the coast. He stared at the indifferent Dustless. His mouth moved, but he still closed his mouth. Dustless's strength is not weaker than his, and his military rank is higher than his. He is also a supreme celestial dragon, and his forces are all over the world. It's not Garp's turn to say anything. Cruel? I feel that this is a different kind of release. It's also a way to make use of trash and squeeze out his last bit of value. It's to let Surd recognize reality and walk towards heaven without regrets. I feel that I'm very kind, Lieutenant General Garp. Happy Mid-Autumn Festival, everyone. Chapter 583. When Black Death said this, Dustless was curious, and his eyes were filled with surprise. Does this guy still have a strong move? The time was a little strange, but then he felt a familiar aura, which made him frown. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he took a deep breath. He was even more curious. At this moment, Black Death put his hand on the hilt, and at the same time took a deep breath, and the extremely curved sword was instantly unsheathed. In the blink of an eye, a ray of cold light shot towards Wu Chun. At this time, after seeing the biting cold light, Dustless couldn't help but be startled, but then he coldly snorted and suddenly jumped up. Taking a deep breath, a cold, murderous aura appeared in his eyes. In that instant, a ray of light shot out. Immediately, an azure saber energy flew out from his body and collided with the saber energy. Everyone's eyes were filled with surprise. At this time, Dustless didn't have the intention to be polite at all, and he instantly opened the eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. At this time, his body was covered with a blue light, and that was Kan Susanoo. He coldly snorted and slowly looked at the person in front of him and said, "Just by you? Although your strength isn't bad, it doesn't seem to be enough. Why don't you try another move?" At this moment, Black Death's face was filled with anger, and he coldly said, "Is that so? Let's try this." Kinsusinu was only in a half-body state. It didn't directly enter the final state. Black Death Mao was not polite at all. He coldly jumped up, and his speed was incomparably fast. He immediately drew a terrifying ray of light with his extremely curved saber, jumped into the air, and his body slightly rotated. Then, he suddenly slashed down with all his might. Dustless saw the sword coming towards him, but he didn't move and just stood there, and at the same time, he immediately raised the shield in his hand. The moment Kinsusinu raised the shield, it directly blocked all the dark energy on the sword, and all the dark energy was completely blocked in an instant. Dustless's expression became colder, and his eyes showed a bit of disdain, and he said with a faint sneer, "This kind of power can't do anything to me. It seems that you've reached the end, right?" When he said this, there was a hint of mockery in his voice. At this moment, after hearing this sentence, Black Death immediately became angrier, and he took a deep breath, and his eyes slightly narrowed. What did you say?" Just as he said this, Wu Chun flew back, and at the same time, he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Fire release. Grand fire annihilation. A huge flame suddenly spewed out from his mouth, and when the terrifying flame sprayed out from his mouth, it directly hit the opponent in front of him. Mao Black Death was shocked when he saw the incomparably huge flame spraying toward him. He sucked in a breath of cold air. The temperature of the flame made him shudder. It was a world of difference from before. Just now it was only 1,000 degrees, but now it had turned white. The pure white flame has reached more than 10,000 degrees. At this time, he couldn't help but be shocked, but at this moment, he made up his mind, clenched his teeth, snorted coldly, and held the sword with both hands, and roared loudly, "Absolutely! I won't lose to you!" After he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed down with his sword. Instantly, the huge white fireball was cut in half. At the same time, the entire fireball roared and exploded with a thunderous sound. In an instant, a lot of sand and stones were burned into glass. At this time, Dustless's face showed a smile, and then he slapped the ground and said indifferently, "You're very interesting. I want that sword in your hand. I want to study it." Lightning release, Earth walk. As soon as he finished speaking, a shocking thunder and lightning spurted out from his hand and directly walked on the ground, like a snake, rushing towards Black Death in front of him in an instant. Black Death was instantly electrocuted by the thunder and lightning, and his whole body was numb. In an instant, he half knelt down and forced himself to stand up with the help of the sword and gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to rush forward again, he saw the energy rising from Dustless's body, and at the same time, under the surprised eyes of everyone, a giant appeared. Dustless also transformed into his ultimate form. In an instant, as if the real god of thunder had descended, a huge Japanese god of thunder appeared in front of everyone, and they couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. Dustless looked at all of this coldly, snorted, and indifferently opened his huge wings, lowered his head proudly, and said, "What? You still want to resist? Although your sword is strong, it's nothing compared to mine." At this point, Black Death's words immediately stabbed his heart. Black Death became even angrier and gritted his teeth. Although he maintained his human form, there was already a change inside. His body was filled with dark energy, and suddenly a cracking sound came from his body. He shouted loudly, "I will never lose to you bastards. I will never lose again." After he finished speaking, his eyes turned red and purple, and at the same time, a burst of energy rushed straight into the sky, and the terrifying power suddenly shocked everyone. Dustless's body erupted with the power of the 10-tailed beast. After all, there's a lot of power hidden in his body. More importantly, he even has the power of Akinoroja. The powerful power of Akinoroja and the ten-tailed beast shocked everyone present, and no one dared to act rashly at this time. Even Black Death, who burst out with amazing energy, was the same. When Mao Black Death felt the terrifying power, the blade in his hand fell to the ground. The dark energy on his body also dissipated at this time. He was stunned, looking at the incomparably huge godlike power in front of him. He couldn't help but be stunned speechless. Dustless didn't hold back, and suddenly raised the Tatsuka sword in his hand, and suddenly slashed down. The moment the sword slashed down, Black Death's head was directly sent flying. At the same time, the dark energy on the strange sword was also absorbed into the gourd. Black Death's soul slowly floated up at this time, and his eyes revealed a sense of helplessness. So this is what death feels like. The death that he had been afraid of was actually so easy. It's all over. Chapter 584. Oni-san. As he walked towards Hell alone, he heard a familiar and slightly warm voice. Black Death, or Jigwa Iwasheng, turned around and looked at his brother, a person who should have died long ago. Why is he waiting for me here? Jigwa Iwasheng's face was full of surprise, looking at his brother in a daze. He couldn't help but take a deep breath, and there was a bit of surprise in his eyes. Jigwa Iwasheng looked at his brother faintly and said, "It's time to pay for the sins of your life." Jigwa Iwasheng's face showed a smile. Then he lowered his head and sighed. "I didn't expect you to wait for me. I didn't expect you to already know." Jigwa Iwasheng smiled and said, "I know. You will definitely come to me. Let's go. Let's go together." Jigwa Iwasheng was a little surprised after hearing this. He nodded, took out the flute that has been hidden in his arms for many years, and after holding the flute tightly, he smiled bitterly. The two brothers went to hell together. And at this time, Dustless directly closed his Manjikyu Sharingan, and at the same time, changed back to his human form in an instant, walked over, and soon saw the sword on the ground. In fact, there is no evil aura on this strange sword, because it has been put away by Dustless. Dustless felt the evil aura inside, and the sword in front of him. He picked up the sword, and his eyes revealed a few complicated feelings. He shook his head and released a lot of chakra, and suddenly squeezed it and directly crushed it. He said faintly, "It's another strange dark power. The last time it was the same in hell. It's really surprising, but maybe I can destroy it." Just as he said this, Mido, who was not far behind him, said with a little fear, "Brother Dustless." Dustless turned back and looked at me being. Everyone saw the surprise in their eyes and smiled embarrassedly. "Oh, sorry for letting you see. In fact, that's also a kind of secret technique. It's just a secret technique that you can't learn." When everyone heard this, they couldn't help but roll their eyes. Miduzi rolled her eyes and said, "I knew it a long time ago. I definitely knew that it wasn't a move that normal humans could learn." Dustless laughed and said, all right, since the matter is settled, let's go back first." Jana directly absorbed the dark energy into his body. It was as if nothing had happened. Then, he started to return with the rest of the group. Dustless's mood was somewhat complicated as he slowly walked on the road. One of them died, but Wuho's body also had that kind of dark energy. The more he thought about it, the more he frowned and snorted. As he walked, he slowly digested the energy in his body. Only then did he realize that it was incomparably familiar. He was very surprised. Wasn't this the condensed power of the black dragon Akinoroja and the ten-tailed beast resentment, as well as the power of many vengeful spirits? The more he thought about it, the more surprised he became. Why would such power fall into their hands? This shouldn't be the case. Could it be that those stones— he suddenly remembered the stones left behind after the Rashomon was shattered. Could it be that they passed through there? Because the Rashomon was summoned by him, it contained his own power. The Rashomon was a place where evil spirits gathered, so there were many vengeful spirits and evil spirits. At this moment, Dustless understood. After coming over, he narrowed his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. At this moment, Tan Zhilong, who was beside him, seemed to have noticed what he was thinking about. He said strangely, "Dustless, are you thinking about something strange? I keep feeling that you have a lot on your mind." After Dustless heard this, he smiled bitterly with a little helplessness. He sighed and said, "It should be something that I can't help. Sigh, there's nothing I can do about it." Just as he said this, Tan Zhilong was very puzzled and said, if that's the case, then what is it?" Dustless said at this moment, "No misery. It's about that guy's power. That guy's power is actually very close. It's a very taboo power in my hometown. It's a very terrifying power. Under normal circumstances, very few people would use that kind of power. I don't know where he got it from." Just as he said this, Tan Zhilong was suddenly stunned. He blinked his eyes in surprise and said in astonishment, "It can't be." Dustless smiled bitterly and scratched his head. "His body contains that kind of power. I can feel it." So, Tan Zhilong narrowed his eyes slightly and took a deep breath. He said with a slightly strange feeling, So it's like that? That's really strange. In the past, I heard people say that no misery seemed to have become like that because of some kind of drug. But after hearing what you said, it seems that things aren't quite the same." Just as he said this, Dustless smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, I'm not very clear about this. I only know." Speaking up to this point, his eyes became sharp. He stood up and said, "Maybe there's some connection. But now, we still have to find him. Otherwise, we won't be able to confirm this matter. We have to quickly get rid of that bastard." Speaking up to this point, his eyes became even sharper. He coldly snorted and took a deep breath. He wanted to quickly get rid of that bastard. He didn't want to feel that kind of power again. At the same time, the power of resentment might play a strange role in this world. This was something he really didn't want. He didn't want to let others use his power to do bad things. Last time, he let Nero take control of a part of it. It was already very dangerous. If something happened this time, it would be very troublesome. He thought this in his heart. After hearing his words, everyone was stunned for a moment, then they all nodded. Soon, everyone arrived at the small path. However, they heard a voice. "This time, we will definitely be able to eliminate no misery. As long as the time is right, we can directly enter Limitless City." That's right. That's right. After Dustless and the others heard this, they felt a little excited. They hurriedly walked into the courtyard and saw that everyone was already there. Dustless and the others had just returned. Everyone immediately turned their heads to look at them. Chapter 585. The old address of the bladesmith village was shrouded in smoke. At this time, a gloomy man in a suit appeared here. His eyes became colder and colder. He looked at the ruins coldly and felt the energy in it. He couldn't help but have a complicated expression as he clenched his teeth. Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia came here, but this time, it wasn't for a mission, nor was it to kill the Ghost Killer team. It was because he felt that his subordinates had died here. At the same time, he also felt that a force close to him had died here. At this moment, after he came here, he suddenly understood that his former hometown, the person who was out of his control, Black Death Mao, Jigua Yin Sheng, is dead. At the same time, 2 of his subordinates had died here, and there wasn't even a corpse left. What was left was obviously completely dissipated. It was impossible for them to be resurrected. This made his expression extremely gloomy, and his eyes revealed a thick, murderous intent. He clenched his teeth and looked at the gloomy weather. His expression became colder and colder. Although he could walk under the sun now, he wasn't satisfied with just walking under the sun. What he wanted to do was to make the whole world fall into darkness. Now that he had directly lost an ally and 2 subordinates, he was extremely angry. He clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. His eyes revealed a thick anger as he said, "Dustless." Just as he said this, a voice sounded in his ear. I didn't expect my brother to die so soon. What a pity." Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia wasn't surprised after hearing the voice. Instead, he muttered to himself, "You have to be careful too. If I die, you will die too." Dancing Ghost Ming Wuxia knew who was talking in his body. It was the guardian ghost of Luoxing Min. Luoxing Min had a total of 3 guardian ghosts, and now one of them had died. There was one in dancing ghost Ming Wuxia's body, and the other one was completely materialized. If for some special reason, his power hadn't fully recovered, so he hadn't appeared. The elder brother, the ghost of Rashomon, said coldly, "You can try. I've given you power, so you must fulfill your promise. This is the entire content of our deal. You must fulfill it. I've already given you power." Ghost dancer Ming Wuxia was cold. He narrowed his eyes and said, "I know what you mean. This time, I will kill everyone in the Ghost Killer team. At the same time, I will create a world like yours, because that is what I want too." His murderous aura surged as he spoke. This time, he had already set up the best trap. It was much better than the last time. This time, he would make all the members of the Ghost Killer team fall into the trap. He would have a chance to kill all of them in one fell swoop. By then, no one would be able to stop his hegemony. He would become the king of the dark world. At this moment, in the headquarters of the Ghost Killers. After listening to the plan, Dustless had some doubts. He frowned and asked curiously, "How did you come up with this plan? Why do I feel that it's a little unreliable? It doesn't seem that easy to kill him. How did you find the entrance to his final nest so quickly?" Just as he said this, Undying Gawa immediately said, "We've already investigated it. There is an entrance not far from the entrance of a cave. If we enter, we can directly find that bastard and kill him." At that time, Dustless interrupted, "Don't be so naive. That guy will definitely have defenses. Also, where did you get the information this time? What's going on?" Just as he said this, everyone was stunned for a moment. Then, they heard Tomioka Yoshihide say, "The information came from a member before he died, so we have reason to believe that it's true. Of course, I also think that it's true because our members have no reason to lie to us. Also, we sent people to verify that there is an entrance there, but we don't know if it's the entrance to Limitless City." After hearing this, Dustless touched his chin and took a deep breath. He narrowed his eyes and said, "If that's the case, then let me go with you. Maybe it will be useful. If only a few of you go, then it's completely unreliable. Let's go together. After all, I also want to kill him." After hearing this, Yoshihide Fuji said, "But you haven't recovered yet. You just went through a battle. If you go with us, then wouldn't it be?" After hearing this, Dustless smiled and said indifferently, "Don't worry, I'm fine. I'm just afraid that you won't be able to cooperate with me. If possible, let's go together." Lamenting Yu Xingming nodded and said, "If that's the case, then let's go together." Everyone was full of confidence when they heard this. At this moment, Dustless felt that something was wrong. He frowned slightly and took a deep breath. He couldn't help but think, those guys must have arranged something in that city. However, as long as he was there, nothing major would happen. At most, there would be some twists and turns. He could definitely eliminate that bastard, even if he wanted to catch a turtle in a jar. Dustless also knew that as long as he was there, no one else would be able to do this move, because with his strength, he wouldn't let anyone die there, and he would definitely be able to kill all the ghosts inside. At this moment, Limitless City, looking at the newly created subordinates in front of him, Wraith Dancer became even colder. He had lost many of his subordinates during the first quarter moon. The only one left in front of him was the newly appointed Song Nu, and IU. Only the older generation of the first quarter moon was left. Tong Mo, Tailang, and Zuiji. This kind of faction was a bit embarrassing and unpleasant. Although their strength had increased a lot, it was inevitable that there would be accidents. Dancing Ghost frowned. He looked at the people present and said, "This time, the mission will be even more difficult. As long as they enter the city, you must find a way to kill them all. I will cooperate with you, and you must not let them escape. This is the plan I'm giving you. Do you understand?" Everyone immediately replied in unison, "We understand." Chapter 586. 3 days later, Dustless led the group to the entrance of the city. It was a narrow cave, but they could feel a special energy bursting out from it. The corners of his mouth curled into a smile. If there was spatial energy, then things would be easier. With that thought in mind, he calmly said, Everyone, if you split into small groups, you must be careful. Don't act rashly. We must find Wu Ku, who is hiding in the city. Don't let your emotions get the better of you." Everyone immediately nodded in agreement. This time, there were many people who followed them, but there were also some who stayed behind to guard the headquarters. Those who stayed behind to guard the headquarters were lamenting Yu Xingming, Purgatory Shen Shoulang, Scaled Dragons with Jinji, Time Tu Lang, and Yusi Tianyuan. As for the others, they would attack Limitless City. There were still many important items and important people in the headquarters, so they had to leave some people behind to protect them. However, with or without them, their hearts calmed down a lot. This time, the attack would definitely succeed. Dustless quickly led the group and directly stepped into the space. As soon as they entered, they directly walked into a strange space. Various rooms floated in it, giving people a strange feeling. Dustless felt that the space was chaotic, and energy was unceasingly flowing in it. He coldly snorted and slightly narrowed his eyes. He took a deep breath and suddenly widened his eyes, turning them into the whites of his eyes. In an instant, he directly saw a wave of energy moving. It was the energy that belonged to his own body. With a cold snort, he turned around to look at the group and said, "Everyone, you must be careful. I have already found the target. I will chase after him first. You must be careful." After he finished speaking, he immediately jumped up and rushed forward. His speed was so fast that people couldn't help but jump in fright. After he left, Miduzi looked around and blinked. At this moment, she felt the floor move. She took a deep breath and suddenly punched the floor, causing everyone to jump in fright. The floor was directly smashed open, and at the same time, a ghost jumped out from it. Miduzi was incomparably fast as she retreated backwards. At this moment, the ghost that came out from the crack was none other than the prostitute Taro, who had obtained a new power. A cold, murderous look appeared on his face. Behind the crowd, a woman's laughter could be heard. "You're all dead. How dare you barge in here? My lord said that he would capture all of you here and kill all of you." As soon as she finished speaking, everyone turned around and saw an extremely beautiful female ghost. At the same time, she was wearing a gorgeous dress and exuded a cold, murderous aura. She looked at everyone with disdain. Purgatory Xing Shou Lang quickly pulled out his saber and instantly entered the second form. At the same time, his eyes became ferocious. Flames ignited on his saber as he looked at everyone and said, "Let's begin." When the crowd heard this, they immediately agreed and nodded their heads. Every one of them revealed a cold killing intent. The killing intent floated up and directly targeted the two ghosts in front of them. Purgatory Xing Shou Lang's eyes suddenly widened as he charged at the prostitute Taro in front of him. "Harlot Taro, I was afraid of that crazy broadsword." Instead, he raised the hook in his hand to block it. The hook in his hand blocked the saber. However, immediately after, a powerful flame energy gushed out and pressed down on him. He couldn't help but jump in fright. Miduzi didn't have any reason to be polite. She suddenly jumped up and clenched her fists. Huge waves of water surged out of them. She shouted loudly, "You bastard, go die for me, Flood Dragon." As her voice fell, she clenched her fists and punched at Taro. Dr. Taro took a step back and jumped onto another building. The building on the roof was drifting away. He clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. He quickly swung his hook, and his hook instantly turned into countless hooks. At the same time, blood-red hooks appeared and surrounded everyone. However, at this moment, a voice rang out. "Breath of the Beast, complete set." As soon as the words left his mouth, he saw two huge swords slashing toward Taro the needle prostitute. The wild fighting style, the two sabers with sharp teeth, and the appearance of a pig head made people feel that it was a little funny. However, that saber slash was solid. With a crack, it cut through the bones. The brothel owner, Turung Jia, was struck in the shoulder by the saber. Half of his body was chopped off. He sucked in a breath of cold air and quickly jumped into another house. At this moment, The powerful force that accompanied the fall of the saber instantly destroyed the house that he had just occupied. After destroying the room, Inosuke felt that he couldn't stand steadily. He suddenly jumped back to his original platform. She coldly sighed, looking with a bit of disappointment at the prostitute Taro, who was standing on top of a floating house not too far away. She said, "This fellow is really boring. He can't handle it at all." Just as he said this, Taro clenched his teeth and felt his scalp go numb. This guy's strength really couldn't be underestimated. As he thought of this, his eyes were filled with shock. He clenched his teeth tightly. For a moment, there were some things that he didn't want to believe. However, in reality, he really couldn't win against this guy. At this moment, Inosuke, who was standing on the ground, didn't react. He felt a huge sense of weightlessness. Only then did the crowd react. A feeling of weightlessness came from beneath their feet. With a loud cry, the crowd dissipated and fell to different places. Taro heaved a sigh of relief. He and his sister were used as bait to lure them deeper. Therefore, at this time, they had to directly lead them in. Otherwise, they wouldn't have appeared here. Seeing her brother injured, fallen concubine quickly came forward and said, "Brother, are you okay?" The prostitute, Taro, shook his head and said with a bitter smile, "I really wish that woman could move faster. Otherwise, I'd be dead for sure. That fellow's blade is truly sharp. Furthermore, there are so many people here. For the two of us to be the bait, it is indeed a bit." Just as he said this, they heard a cold voice. "What are you whispering about? Why aren't you chasing after them?" The voice that came from the bottom of their hearts immediately made them shudder. The two siblings quickly chased after the direction where everyone fell. Chapter 587. Ishinosuk blinked his eyes and looked around. When he went there, he only saw a lotus pond in front of him. At the same time, he was surrounded by a square. He stood up blankly and felt strange. He always felt that something was wrong with him. He touched the back of his head and was very surprised. And at this time, he heard a voice, "Ishinosuk." Ishinosuk turned his head and looked over. It was a woman wearing a butterfly robe. Butterfly Ninja at this moment. The butterfly ninja anxiously ran to his side and said, "Did you fall here too? Where's this place? It seems like there's a special seal here." Just as he said this, Ishinosuk's nose twitched and his eyes revealed a bit of doubt. He took a deep breath and looked forward. Suddenly, he was stunned. He saw a very beautiful man in front of him. Butterfly Ninja turned his head and looked over. In an instant, his eyes were filled with hatred. He couldn't help but widen his eyes and take a deep breath. The power of hatred surged, because what appeared in front of them was incomparably beautiful, but at the same time, completely without a trace of human emotion. Tong Mo. There was a faint smile on Tong Mo's face. He looked at the two people in front of him and said, "Your eyes seem to know each other, but I don't seem to know you." Butterfly Ninja noticed that the man in front of him didn't have a smile on his face. He didn't want to smile. Then he said faintly, "I can see who you are. You are the person who killed my sister, Tong Mo." After hearing this, Tong Mo couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. There was a bit of surprise in his eyes. He looked at the girl in front of him and said with a smile on his face, "So you are that woman's sister." It was really interesting at that time, but unfortunately, I didn't eat you. Although his face was full of smiles, he didn't have much intention to smile. He just wanted to smile. And at this time, Ishinosuk took a deep breath and nodded. "Call me a ghost." There is such a strong ghost aura on his body, and there is a strong smell of blood. It seems that he has eaten a lot of people. I have to kill him. After hearing this, Butterfly Ninja couldn't help but be stunned. This guy's reaction was really slow. Obviously, this was a ghost. At this time, Ishinosuk directly threw the pig head on the ground and took a deep breath, revealing a beautiful face like a girl. Butterfly Ninja was stunned for a moment. Didn't this guy refuse to take off the pig head? How come now? Tong Mo took off the mask in front of him and said very strangely, "I remember, you are that woman's son." Ishinosuk took a deep breath at this time, shook his head, and said strangely, "Although I don't know who you are talking about, I know that you should be a very familiar person to me, but you are a ghost, so let's kill you first." Just as he finished speaking, he abruptly pulled out his two blades and placed them in front of him. Tong Mo looked at a Shinasuk in front of him with some puzzlement. He said strangely, "What's the use of this? It's really strange." At this time, Butterfly Ninja immediately pulled out the sword in her hand. Facing the enemy in front of him, his hatred was completely released. At the same time, at this moment, his eyes suddenly widened. With the blessing of the cursed seal and the support of the breathing technique, Butterfly Ninja's strength greatly increased, instantly turning into a super big sister of one. 8 meters. At the same time, the narrow blade in her hand became wider. The hook became deeper, and at the same time, her eyes became more focused. She directly entered the second state. Butterfly Ninja coldly looked at Tong Mo and said, "I will take revenge." Tong Mo gently waved the ice fan in his hand. His face was full of disdain. But at this time, they heard a voice, "Hashiman Tonku, 6th gate. Open." Just as he said this, the two of them were shocked. At this moment, they saw a terrifying green energy rushing into the sky. Kuhirai is Shinasuk's division and concurrent position opened the 6th gate in an instant. The terrifying energy swept out in all directions. At this moment, even Tong Mo, who was the second first quartermaster and had obtained a brand new power, could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. What was wrong with this stinking brat? Something was wrong, too wrong. Why was this fellow so strange? His power, Tong Mo frowned. For a time, he clenched his teeth and took a deep breath. For a while, he was speechless. What's wrong with this guy? Why at this time, his Shinasuk wasn't satisfied. His eyes suddenly opened wide, and then he shouted, "Don't underestimate me. I haven't used my full strength yet. Let me try this." After he finished speaking, the energy in his body rose, and the sound of an explosion was heard. The terrifying power gushed out, and the amazing strength was finally displayed. 6th gate. Open. At the same time, his skin instantly grew spots. What was even more exaggerated was that the energy rising from his body seemed to be completely endless. This terrifying power made people shudder even though it was not cold. This incomparably terrifying power suddenly made Tong Mo clench his teeth. For a while, he quickly said in surprise, "What's going on? Why is it like this? How could you possibly have such power?" The Butterfly Ninja also took a deep breath. His eyes narrowed slightly, and he said faintly, "Not only him. I won't let you go. I will definitely cut you." At this time, the immortal breathing technique also came into effect. The moment the Butterfly Ninja's eyes widened, the energy surged, and in an instant, the surroundings fell into turmoil. The first time in history, Tong Mo's heart was finally filled with fear. That was because this was a power that far exceeded his own. It was a power that was practically impossible to defeat. What kind of power was this? This caused his scalp to involuntarily turn numb. His eyes were filled with terror as he involuntarily jumped in fright. What's wrong with these two guys? It shouldn't be. With this kind of strength, how can they become so strong? Why is it like this? The more he thought about it, the more fear he felt. Chapter 588. Without any hesitation, Ishinasuk once again released an even more astonishing power. At this time, the dual blades became even wilder. At the same time, the energy in his body skyrocketed. At this time, Ishinasuk had completely entered the second state, and at the same time, the strength of his body increased by a lot. His eyes turned red and purple. He picked up the two wild fang blades and slashed towards Tong Mo in front of him. Tong Mo saw the two wild fang blades slashing towards him. Tong Mo's eyes were filled with shock. Blood Ghost Art Creeping Lotus. The icy white fog formed vines one after another, and directly rushed towards a Shinasuk who was attacking in front of him. The energy in a Shinasuk's body was very terrifying, although he didn't have any attack skills. However, it was incomparably terrifying. A thunderous rumble immediately sounded out as the blade smashed down, creating a huge hole in the ground. This caused the surrounding area to tremble. The powerful and terrifying strength caused Tong Mo's scalp to involuntarily turn numb. In an instant, he hurriedly retreated dozens of meters away. His eyes were full of surprise, and he was shocked, and he clenched his teeth. This guy's strength is very fast. How can it be so exaggerated? Insect's breath, butterflies dance tease. At this time, the butterfly ninja suddenly jumped up, and the blade in his hand that had become incomparably wild slashed 5 times in a row. And suddenly, 5 blade auras were released from 5 directions, directly slashing down. When Tong Mo heard 5 rays of light flying towards him, he was shocked, but then he saw the golden fan in his hand completely spread out at this time. And at this time, he quickly waved the fan in his hand and said with a disdainful sneer, "Only this strength. Blood ghost art, withered garden falling snow." When Tong Mo's words fell, a golden fan appeared in both of his hands, and at the same time, he waved it, and suddenly, the 5 blade auras were completely dissipated in an instant. There was a slight hint of ridicule in his eyes, and although it was a little difficult, he still didn't lose some of his elegance. He said coldly, "This kind of strength is really not enough." As soon as he said that, the butterfly was infuriated. She took a deep breath while holding the saber in one hand. Her eyes suddenly widened, and the immortal energy in her body became even more vigorous. He said coldly, "You damned bastard, you don't have the slightest smell of living on your body." Just as he said this, a faint smile appeared on Tong Mo's face. He shook his head and said, "Who is the one to decide who should live and who should die? My body is filled with a smell that you humans don't like, but your bodies are filled with a smell that I like." As he spoke, a faint smile appeared on his face. And at this moment, after hearing these words, the butterfly ninja became even more impolite. He had been training for a long time. This time, he came to avenge his sister, so he definitely wouldn't be polite. Insect's breath, bee's tooth dance. Zhenyi. He abruptly made a move and leaped into the air. A pair of butterfly-like wings sprouted from his back and flapped them in an instant. At the same time, an incomparably sharp light appeared on his saber. He directly made a move towards Tong Mo. When Tong Mo saw the saber coming towards him, a look of disdain appeared on his face. He shook his head and sighed. "So what if I let you stab me? Your saber can't hurt me at all. Come and try." Blood demon art. Scattering lotus. He immediately used a powerful move. The fan in his hand suddenly slashed down like a saber. Instantly, a saber aura accompanied by countless sharp ice shards rushed towards the butterfly ninja in front of him. The butterfly ninja was filled with determination. How could he be afraid at this moment? Facing the saber aura, he only snorted coldly and stabbed his saber. In an instant, the saber broke through the ice shards with a loud boom. In an instant, Tong Mo reacted and quickly condensed a block of ice in front of him. He flew back and jumped to the side of the lotus pond. With a bitter laugh, the ice shards immediately exploded. Tong Mo's eyes were filled with surprise. He couldn't help but say in amazement, "Compared to your sister, you have improved a little. Your sister doesn't have much strength and insisted on using her saber to chop off my head. You are very different. Your stab is very effective." When he finished speaking, the butterfly ninja immediately swung his saber. In an instant, a biting cold light flashed. He took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes slightly. He said, "Is that so?" Just as he said that, he heard a voice ring out. "Beast breath, type 8, explosive advance." Mohei Shinasuk's voice rang out. He suddenly increased his speed. In an instant, his speed reached the limit. In an instant, with a boom, he appeared beside Tong Mo. Tong Mo immediately gripped his fan tightly with both hands. However, before he could react, he saw two ridiculously huge fanged sabers smashing down on his head. He couldn't help but jump in fright. However, he quickly waved his fan like a saber, and two huge icicles appeared in an instant. After the fanged broadsword hit the icicle was instantly shattered. Tong Mo flew up and quickly jumped into the lotus pond sculpture. He couldn't help but breathe. He was a little nervous. This guy's a little difficult to deal with. He just thought. Beast's breath. Gio's teeth stretched snake crack. When the voice rang out, the two people were shocked. Mohei Ishinasuk directly lengthened, or it could be said that he became even bigger. At the same time, his hands instantly became like a snake holding two sabers. He directly rushed towards the huge sculpture. His speed was incomparably fast. Suddenly, the sculpture was slashed apart by the thunder god. Tong Moshi, who was standing on top of the sculpture, was stunned. He suddenly jumped into the sky, and at the same time, waved his two fans. He softly chanted, "Blood Demon Art, Spreading Lotus." When he said that, he successfully cast the art. In an instant, countless ice crystals slowly flew towards Mohei Ishinasuk behind him and attacked. At this time, Mohei Ishinasuk only showed a disdainful expression. He swung his sabers and shouted loudly, "Beast breath, Gio's teeth spinning teeth." Suddenly, the two sabers rotated and all the attacks were dissolved. He turned around and slashed. Chapter 589. Tong Mo was a little surprised and immediately turned around. At the same time, the two swords were blocked by his fan, but he was also sent flying more than 10 meters away. Saito Ishinasuk has been in 3 states for a long time, so he was a little tired. But soon he gritted his teeth and said, "I'll fight for a chance. I'll kill him with one slash." Hearing this, Tong Mo nodded. The butterfly ninja grunted and nodded. Then, he took a deep breath and jumped up. The saber in his hand spun and opened up. Insect's breath, fly's dance, compound, I hexagon. The butterfly ninja didn't hold back, and in an instant, his wings grew again. The sword in his hand stabbed towards the enemy in front of him. Tong Mo saw the butterfly ninja stabbing towards him, and his face was a little confused. Is this guy stupid? How can he attack? Just as he was thinking this, he couldn't help but be stunned. The one in front of him suddenly turned into 6 people, and, at the same time, they attacked from 6 different directions. When Tong Mo heard this scene, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. Then, he laughed very excitedly, and with both hands holding the fan, he said excitedly, "Interesting, this is fun. Woman, you're quite interesting. I didn't expect you to be able to display such strength. Since you have such an interesting move, I'll use an even more interesting move to respond." The moment he stabilized his horse stance, the wide and beautiful robe on his body was stretched open, and he suddenly shouted, "Blood Demon Art, Frozen Cloud." Suddenly, the power that was displayed directly swept over, and the 6 people were directly frozen. What's more, the 6 people were directly shattered in an instant. At this time, his face showed a cold smile, and slowly put away the fan, and took 2 or 3 steps back. Looking at the slowly falling ice crystals, there was a slight disdain on his face. At this time, he couldn't help but twitch his nose, and suddenly he was stunned. In an instant, his face was stunned, and his eyes were full of surprise, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. He directly knelt down, gritted his teeth, and stepped back again. His eyes narrowed slightly. The fear of death came again, and this made his scalp numb. This is such a familiar smell, and such a concentrated smell. The butterfly ninja swung his blade out of the icy white mist and walked out. He said in an elegant voice, "It's a poison that has been concentrated 700 times. The poison of wisteria. At the same time, this poison will only work on you ghosts because I have made a special modification. More importantly, this poison no longer has a color like before. I specially changed it to be colorless and odorless. Only when it enters your body will you be able to smell the Chinese wisteria gas drifting in the air." When he said this, Tong Mo was already starting to feel the strain on his body. He forced himself to his feet and retreated a dozen steps. Then, he coughed out a mouthful of blood. This was a type of poison. Tong Mo suddenly felt that something was amiss. He had thrown out so many ice crystals, but they were completely ineffective. Could it be that these two didn't need to breathe? Something was wrong. With this thought in mind, he narrowed his eyes and took a deep breath. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth, shouting, "I will never lose to you two idiots. Blood ghost art. Fierce cold Baiji." After he finished speaking, he slapped his hands on the ground, and a huge ice statue appeared. The ice statue appeared in front of the two. At the same time, the butterfly ninja couldn't help but jump in fright. However, he quickly retreated backward. The ice sculpture was a beautiful woman. The woman opened her mouth, and countless poisonous gas floated out. In an instant, the gas rushed towards the two of them. The poisonous gas was accompanied by ice. If it entered the two's body, they would die instantly. However, this was only Tong Mo's guess. Something unexpected happened. Within the icy white fog, the two of them were just standing there in a very light manner. Mouthy Ashinasuk had been preparing all this time. His eyes narrowed, and the two fang blades in his hands were stabbed into the ground beside him. He didn't move, he just stood there. He didn't want to waste any more time. He wanted to finish off this terrifying, man-eating ghost in front of him in one blow. At this time, Baiji finally attacked. In an instant, she raised her hand and attacked the two. The butterfly ninja wasn't the same. The woman who used to be weak when holding a blade coldly snorted and waved the blade in her hand. She took a deep breath and slashed out. Insect's breath, dance of the butterfly, tease. It was merely a single slash, but it possessed an immense destructive power. In an instant, it caused the ice statue in front of him to shatter. The terrifying power caused Tong Mo to involuntarily jump in fright. Tong Mo frowned slightly. After being startled, he jumped up in surprise and coldly snorted, "I will definitely not lose to you guys." After saying that, he took a deep breath. Energy surged in his body, and he shouted, "Blood ghost art. Winter ice pillar." They jumped directly into the air. At the same time, countless ice condensed in an instant, condensing into a white cloud above their heads. Tong Mo jumped behind the two of them and said coldly, "Die in the ice. I'm already angry. I don't want to play with you brats anymore." After saying that, he slowly put away his fan, thinking that the matter was over. Then, he heard a cold voice appear. "If you think that it's over, then you're too naive. Seventh gate of wonder. Open." The moment the voice fell, Ashinasuk had already turned on a powerful energy switch in an instant. In an instant, transparent blood vessels immediately appeared on his body. At the same time, he suddenly turned around and slashed with his sword. The ice was about to fall. At that moment, the high energy soared into the sky, breaking all the clouds in an instant. The incomparably terrifying power had destroyed all the clouds in an instant. The blood ghost tree had also been completely dispelled in an instant. Mouthy Ashinasuk was only accumulating energy. He didn't use up all his energy. Chapter 590. When Tong Mo saw this, he couldn't help but jump in fright. The butterfly ninja seized the opportunity and jumped up with incredible speed. At the same time, he flapped his wings, and the blade in his hand instantly turned into a slender sword. Insect's breath, centipede's dance. 100 feet, snake belly. The moment the voice fell, the butterfly ninja flew out. The butterfly ninja had already rushed out. The thin arrow in his hand was as thin as a toothpick. He quickly attacked. Tong Mo didn't have time to see clearly, but he discovered that there were hundreds of wounds on his body. He couldn't help but jump in fright and quickly retreated. In half a second, there were hundreds of holes on his body. But soon, with the ghost's regenerative ability, he quickly returned to his original state. His face revealed a disdainful sneer as he rolled his eyes and said, "So that's it? You're just tickling me." When he said this, There was a hint of mockery in his voice. The butterfly ninja slowly retracted his blade and returned to his normal state. He lightly said, "Ishizuk, the rest is up to you." After Ishinosuk heard this, he nodded, and his speed began to speed up. Beast Breath, 18th Explosive Advance. His speed was extremely fast, close to the speed of light. In an instant, there was a loud bang as he hit Tong Mo. Tong Mo didn't have time to see clearly, and his entire body was sent flying into the air. At the same time, he stabilized his body in the air. But at this moment, immediately, a violent gust of wind came from behind him. When he heard the sound, he immediately turned around to attack. But just as he was about to attack, his hand fell to the ground. He was stunned. Beast Breath, second Fong Slash. When the voice rang in his ears, he discovered that his right hand was also broken. Ishizuk's speed was more than 10 times faster than before. The blade in his hand was constantly waving and cutting off both of Tong Mo's hands. Then he suddenly slammed his head down and knocked Tong Mo to the ground. Tong Mo heaved a sigh of relief as he hastily turned around and ran. His face was filled with terror, and the fear of death caused his scalp to turn numb. Tong Mo clenched his teeth tightly, and his hands quickly grew back. He quickly took out a fan and shouted, "I won't die, you damn bastards! Blood Demon Art Crystallization Yuko." The moment he landed, he waved the fan in his hand. Immediately, the energy in his body surged. In an instant, an exact copy of himself appeared in front of him. It was the clone that he had created. In an instant, Zhong immediately rushed out. The fan in his hand was as sharp as a knife. In an instant, he directly slashed at Zuihei Ishinosuk. Ishinosuk just snorted in disdain. With a slash, a loud sound came out. Beast Breath, Three Fangs Fong Tier. That powerful force instantly tore the clone into pieces when Ishinosuk landed on the ground. Tong Mo was already a dozen meters away from him. At the same time, his eyes widened as he clapped his hands together and roared, "Who would lose to you?" Blood Ghost Spell, Mist Ice Water Lotus Bodhisattva. As soon as his voice fell, the ice immediately formed a huge bodhisattva. A huge ice bodhisattva appeared in front of them. The butterfly ninja was a little worried in his heart, but the corner of his mouth outlined a confident smile. "I will win this time." And just at this moment, Ishinosuk took a deep breath. The moment he clenched his swords, his body burst out. With a bang, he arrived in front of the huge ice bodhisattva statue that had just formed. Day Tiger. Just as his voice fell, at this moment, a powerful energy gushed out from his body, causing the surroundings to shake. A huge tiger directly tore all the ice, tore the cold wind, and tore Tong Mo, who was trying to escape to recover. Tong Mo's body was cut in half, and he was also sent flying more than 10 meters away. Only then did he slowly stabilize and land on the road. At the same time, there was a long gully on the road. Ishinosuk completely broke all the power in one move, but he was also exhausted at this time. He directly breathed a sigh of relief, gritted his teeth, and dropped his swords on the ground. His whole body half knelt down. At the same time, the transparent blood vessels returned to their original state. His fluttering long hair also directly drooped down. At this moment, the butterfly ninja rushed forward and quickly supported Ishinosuk, who was about to fall down. Ishinosuk must be exhausted. After using so much power, his face was full of fatigue, and he said with a wry smile, "Finally defeated him." The butterfly ninja seemed to think of something, and there was a bit of doubt in his eyes as he said, "You in him," Ishinosuk faintly said. "He is my enemy, who killed my mother. I lived with him for a period of time, but then he killed my mother. My mother threw me into the river to drift, and finally let me live." From the first time he saw this enemy in front of him, in that cold and elegant style, this seemingly wild child, but in fact this meticulous young man remembered his own life experience. So he wanted to end the enemy in front of him with one strike. At this moment, Tong Mo still stood up. His body was originally cut into two halves, but the two halves fused together and became a complete body. When he stood up, he laughed wildly and said with a face full of smiles, "Do you think you've won? You just made me spend a lot of power. I have obtained powerful energy. No one can defeat me. Do you think?" His body spewed out an amazing amount of dark energy, but at this time, Ishinasuk felt very troublesome and wanted to stand up and fight. The butterfly ninja faintly said, "If you think you can still fight, if you think you can still survive, then give it a try." Tongamo couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of nervous foam in horror. His fused body began to dissipate. He only felt that he was melting like a candle, and he suddenly felt pain. He was very surprised and said, "Why is this happening?" The butterfly ninja said indifferently, "Why is it like this?" "Because your body has already been pierced by me hundreds of times, but in that instant, I injected 7,000 times the wisteria poison. Moreover, it's profitable. When your strength is almost exhausted, it will directly dissolve your body." Tong Mo's face changed, but he had no face, and in an instant, his body melted, and at the same time, his soul scattered with a wind to hell. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.